Ah, creepypastas. They go as far back as the 1990s and originally began as chainmail. You know, the classic, forward this to 10 people or you'll have a heart attack. Though they started taking off when the internet became more mainstream, with the term even coming from copypasta. Do you get it? Copy and paste. Come on guys, get with the program. It's not like this is a third installment of the creepypasta series. Being born in 2002, I and many of my middle school friends were fascinated by stories like Ben Drowned, NES Godzilla, Carmen Winstead, and many others which you'll see in this video. And even though I knew of creepypastas, I never went out of my way to read them. So I hope you guys use this as a guide and come back to this video whenever you want to hear a creepypasta, narrated by a nice voice. That voice being mine. And side note, creepypastas are not real. No, you won't develop cardiac arrest from playing a weird version of a Nintendo 64 game. This is all fiction. This is not real. I want to give full credit to the websites that I read directly from, and I'll try my best to give credit to every single artist whose art I used in this video, but sometimes I can't find the artist. So if I'm missing any credits, make sure to contact me. Anyway, that's really it for this intro, but I do want to let you guys know that this is the final installment of the creepypasta series. This video is already extremely long, and I do want to make an ultimate compilation of all the stories, maybe in the future where it's just going to be like a 5 or 4 hour video on my channel. I think that would be really cool. But yeah, we're done. This is it. And I know some people are going to comment talking about, well, you didn't talk about this one. Bruh, we're doing the mainstream ones, okay? So no, I'm not doing the one that only 12 people read and you thought was cool. We're sticking to these. It takes a lot of work reading these, and I'm done, bruh. This is it. With that being said, grab your popcorn, or if you're gonna fall asleep, I guess, to my voice because I'm so cool, close your eyes. That sounds crazy. Let's get started with our first story. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are finishing up the creepypasta series, and this video is about 3 hours long. It's the longest video on my channel by a long shot, but I do want to say this video will be just like a little bit different. So usually I just read the story in full and then I give my thoughts about it afterwards. This time I'll be giving you guys some context before reading the story and then giving you my thoughts after. That's literally the only difference. And also, I got a haircut, bruh. Dude, my barber gave me the mullet again, bruh. This is literally the mullet I used to have a long time ago. I didn't want this, so I'm gonna get rid of it soon. But let's get started with the video. Alright, so first up we have the story of Carmen Winstead. If that name doesn't ring a bell, I'm sure you've still heard the audio. So just for context, Carmen Winstead is an urban legend. It's the story of a girl who was murdered by her group of friends, which weren't really her friends, and her spirit ended up murdering them as a get back, and also murdering everyone who gets a certain chain text that if they don't send it to 20 people, they also die. This is the most classic case of a chain text. I'm pretty sure I got it back in the day, like on Kick Messenger or something. So what you guys are about to hear is the original audio. It is a little bit creepy because they used like some voice generator thing back in the day, and those didn't sound too good. And then I'm gonna read the actual true story, which is fake. I want to make it clear that all these creepypastas are fake. They are fake. None of these are real. Even though this one says you could even look it up on Google, it is not real. I did my research. So what you guys are about to hear is the Carmen Winstead story.
Hi, my name is Carmen Winstead. I'm 17 years old. I am very similar to you. Did I mention to you that I'm dead? A few years ago a group of girls pushed me down a sewer hole to try and embarrass me. When I didn't come back up, the police came. The girls said that I had fell and everyone believed them. The police found my body in the sewer. I had a broken neck and my face was torn off. Send this message to 15 people, after you listen the whole message, if you value your life. A boy called David received this message. He just left and deleted it. When he was in the shower he heard laughing. My laughter. He got really scared and rushed to his phone to repost this message, but he was too late. The next morning his mom entered his bedroom and all she found was a message written in his blood saying you will never have him back. No one has found his body yet, because he is with me. A girl called Charlotte received this message and she immediately sent it to 25 people, 10 more than required. I still watch over every second of her life to make sure that she is safe and to keep her and everyone close to her out of danger. Send this to 15 people in the next 5 minutes, if you don't want your fate to be the same as David's. Your time starts now. The story is true. You can research it on Google.
The story of Carmen Winstead. This specific version was written by Ashley Hall. A young girl was in her bathroom at home, getting ready to take a shower, when she heard a strange noise. A faint gurgling. Although in the back of her mind she registered it as odd, she quickly dismissed it as something happening in the plumbing. She steps into the shower and turns on the hot water tap, before stepping back out as the cold water in the pipe flows through, allowing room for the warm then hot water to come out. As she stands, waiting, periodically running her hand under the spray, she hears the sound again. This time it was louder and seemed to be coming from the drain. At first she thinks her mind is playing tricks, for the sound is of laughing, a strange mocking chuckle, clearly audible over the exiting water. To anyone else this may have been no more than a curiosity, a trick of the mind, but for her it's something more. She remembers an event that had taken place 7 months earlier, a lie she had been a part of, and a tragedy she helped cause. She yells out for her mom, who is quick to respond. She tells her mom of the strange laughter, but all she receives in return is a strange look and a suggestion to forget about it, to go to bed. The girl does this, not knowing her end is near. That night, the mother hears a series of loud bangs reverberating around the house. She gets out of bed to investigate, and upon entering her daughter's room, she finds the bed empty. Her daughter was gone. The police are called in, and a search is carried out. It doesn't take too long for the girl to be located. It was soon discovered that a nearby sewer cap was partially opened. Shining their torches into the opening, they find the missing girl, head looking back up towards them, the neck twisted at an unnatural angle, her face stripped of its flesh. Before long, 4 other girls would meet the same fate. Carmen Winstead had returned for her revenge. Carmen Winstead was a 17-year-old student in Indiana who was killed when she was pushed into an open sewer by 5 other students. At the time, the school was having a fire drill. Carmen was the odd one out, so it wasn't uncommon for a certain clique of female students to pick on her. It was meant to be a joke, a way to embarrass Carmen in front of the school. However, after she did not re-emerge from the sewer, the police were called in. Before long, her body was recovered. Her neck had broken when her head hit the ladder and was further damaged when she finally hit the concrete wall at the bottom. The students were all questioned, but as no one except for the girls who pushed her had seen anything, all guilty parties managed to lie their way out of it. They told the same story. She had fallen in, and the death was ruled an accident. Several months later, many students at the school started emails and messages on their MySpace accounts titled, "They Pushed Her," which told the truth of what really happened that day. Carmen had not accidentally fallen into the sewer, but had been pushed. The emails did not disclose the identities of the guilty parties involved, but rather threatened that there would be horrible consequences if they did not confess. Many thought this was just a horrible prank to be played on those with the still fresh memories of the tragedy, but for at least 5 girls in the school, a panic must have set in. Someone knew what had happened and was threatening them. A few days later, the events described at the beginning of this post took place. First, one of the girls is taken from their house, killed and disfigured, and left to be found in the sewer. Then another and another, until all 5 girls had met the same fate. Carmen is apparently not satisfied. She has become a twisted entity whose sole purpose is to have the truth of her death known. Not content with the deaths of the guilty party, she will visit anyone who does not believe the story and forward it on to others. And so goes the background of one of the more famous chain letters that has been in circulation since about 2006. It still pops up every now and then as people continue to receive this story and forward it on just in case. There is no substantial proof that Carmen Winstead ever existed, was pushed into a sewer, and definitely no proof that her vengeful spirit killed the guilty parties and any other who failed to believe the story. Still, not having proof doesn't necessarily mean the events didn't take place. Maybe it happened in another part of the world and the details changed to better fit a new audience. It has certainly been a popular story outside of the US, with many searches for the details originating from the Philippines. Regardless of its fiction, by having written this post and sharing it with you all, I am certainly moved by Miss Winston's wrath. What about you? Alright, so Carmen Winstead. Was it a good story? I don't think so. I just think it had a cultural impact on the internet due to the chain text meta, if that's what you want to call it. There's not really much to say about it. If you guys have ever interacted with this chain text, if someone has messaged you about it, please let me know down in the comments below. Up next, we have the story of Herobrine. The context for that one is pretty simple. I mean, we've all played Minecraft, right? If you haven't played Minecraft, well, the story of Herobrine is that someone was playing single player Minecraft and they ended up seeing someone with the Steve skin, Steve being the default player skin, without any pupils. And allegedly that ended up being the creator of Minecraft, Notch, his dead brother, which is not true, by the way. I want to make that clear. It's not true. This one, I guess I'll just let it play. So you guys are about to listen to Herobrine. Herobrine. I had recently spawned in a new world in single-player Minecraft. Everything was normal at first as I began chopping down trees and crafting a workbench. I noticed something move amongst the dense fog. I have a very slow computer, so I have to play with a tiny render distance. I thought it was a cow, so I pursued it, hoping to grab some leather for armor. It wasn't a cow though. Looking back at me was another character with the default skin, but his eyes were empty. I saw no name pop up, and I double checked to make sure I wasn't in multiplayer mode. He didn't stay long. He looked at me and quickly ran into the fog. I pursued out of curiosity, but he was gone. I continued on with the game, not sure what to think. As I expanded the world, I saw things that seemed out of place for the random map generator to make. 2x2 tunnels and rocks, small perfect pyramids made of sand in the ocean, and groves of trees with all their leaves cut off. I would constantly think I saw the other player in the deep fog, but I never got a better look at him. I tried increasing my render distance to far whenever I thought I saw him, but it was to no avail. I saved the map and went on the forums to see if anyone else had found the pseudo player. There were none. I created my own topic telling of the man and asking if anyone had a similar experience. The post was deleted within 5 minutes. I tried again and the topic was deleted even faster. I received a DM from username Herobrine containing one word: stop. When I went to look at Herobrine's profile, the page got 404'd. I received an email from another user. He claims the mods can read the forum user messages, so we were safer using email. The emailer claimed that he had seen the mystery player too, and had a small directory of other users who had seen him as well. Their worlds were littered with obvious man-made features as well, and described their mystery player to have no pupils. About a month passed until I heard my informant again. Some of the people who had encountered the mystery man had looked into the name Herobrine and found that name to be frequently used by a Swedish gamer. After some further information gathering, it was revealed to be the brother of Notch, the game's developer. I personally emailed Notch and asked him if he had a brother. It took him a while, but he emailed me back with a very short message. I did, but he's no longer with us. I haven't seen the mystery man since our first encounter, and I haven't noticed any changes to the world other than my own. I was able to press print screen when I first saw him. Here's the only evidence of his existence. Alright, this is another classic one. I mean, we've all heard of this one, I'm pretty sure. I used to love the story of Herobrine. I remember trying to find him with my friends and being like, those blocks weren't there before. But it's like, they probably were. We were just being kids. I actually didn't know that Herobrine started off as a creepypasta, but the term creepypasta could be a lot of things. It's like an umbrella term almost. Is that the right thing to say? Umbrella term? Am I going to offend anyone? I don't know. Yeah, because I would have never expected like Carmen Winstead, Herobrine to be creepypastas. I just thought they were like urban legends, but with the definition of creepypasta, they do fit into it. Herobrine's a classic. I'll leave it at that. And up next, we have one called icideMouse.AVI. So, what's the context for this one? This is another average creepypasta where it's a forbidden file, and it starts acting weird, and then, actually, I don't want to spoil it, so let's just listen to icideMouse.AVI. icideMouse.AVI. So do any of you remember those Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 1930s? The ones that were just put on a DVD a few years ago? Well, I hear there's one that was unreleased to even the most avid classic Disney fans. According to sources, it's nothing special, just a continuous loop, like the Flintstones, of Mickey walking past 6 buildings that goes on for 2 or 3 minutes before fading out. Unlike the cutesy tunes usually put in though, the song in this cartoon was not a song at all. Just constant banging on a piano for 1.5 minutes before switching to white noise for the remainder of the film. It wasn't the jolly old mouse we've come to love either. Mickey wasn't dancing or smiling. He was just kind of walking like you or me with a normal, slightly dismal facial expression and his head tilted to the side. Up until a year or two ago, everyone believed that after the film cut to black, that was it. When Leonard Maltin was reviewing the cartoon to decide whether it belonged in the complete series, he decided it was too junk to be on the DVD, but wanted to have a digital copy due to the fact that it was an original creation of Walt. Once he created a digitalized version on his computer and looked at the file, he noticed something. The cartoon was actually 9 minutes and 4 seconds long. This is what my source emailed me in full. He's a personal assistant of one of the higher executives at Disney and an acquaintance of Mr. Maltin himself. After it cut to black, it stayed like that until the 6th minute before going back to Mickey walking. The sound was different this time. It was a murmur. It wasn't even language, more like gurgled cry. As the noise got louder and more indistinguishable over the next minute, the picture began to get weird. The sidewalk started twisting in directions that seemed impossible based on the physics of Mickey's walking, and the dismal face of the mouse was slowly curling into a smirk. In the 7th 7th minute, the murmur turned into a blood-curdling scream, the kind painful to hear. The picture was getting more obscure too. Colors were appearing that shouldn't have been possible at the time. Mickey's face began to fall apart. His eyes rolled onto the bottom of his chin like two marbles in a fishbowl. Now he had a curled smile pointing upwards towards the left side of his face. The buildings became rubble floating in midair. Meanwhile, the sidewalk was still navigating in warped directions, a few seeming inconceivable to what we, as humans, know about direction. Mr. Malton became disturbed and left the room at this point, sending an employee to finish the video and note down everything that happened. Afterwards, he was to immediately store the cartoon's disc in the vault. The distorted screaming in the film lasted until 8 minutes and a few seconds in, before abruptly cutting to the Mickey Mouse face seen at the credits of every Disney video from that time, with what sounded like a broken music box playing in the background. This continued for about 30 seconds. Whatever was in those remaining 30 seconds, I haven't been able to get a sliver of information about. From a security guard working under me who was making the rounds outside of that room, I was told that, after the last frame, the employee stumbled out of the room with pale skin, stating that, quote, real suffering is not known, 7 times before speedily taking the guard's pistol and offing himself on the spot. The only thing I could get out of Leonard Maltin was that the last frame of the film was a piece of Russian text that said something along the lines of, the sights of hell bring its viewers back in. As far as I know, no one else has seen it, but there have been dozens of attempts at getting the file on RapidShare by employees inside the studios, all of whom have been promptly terminated from their jobs. Whether it got online or not is up for debate, but if rumors serve me right, it's out there somewhere under icideMouse.AVI. If you ever find a copy of the film, don't view it. Contact me by phone immediately, regardless of the time. When a Disney death is covered up as well as this, it means it has to be something huge. Get back to me. Signed, TR. I've yet to find a copy, but it's out there. I know it. Yeah, pretty corny, right? I had never really heard of this one. I think I may have I don't know. Okay, so maybe I did hear about it, but I never cared about it too much. I always thought, I didn't really care about it. Just sounded corny. It sounded almost like a ripoff of Squidward's Suicide. So, yeah. I think that might be the lamest one on this list, I'm not gonna lie. But let's head on over to username 666. So the context for username 666 is actually really interesting, especially if you're a big fan of the YouTube website, because I love this website. I don't know if you could tell, since it's my job and all that. But it's basically another creepypasta, but this one actually has a video accompanying it that was uploaded years ago. I'm talking almost a decade ago, maybe already a decade ago. So that's what made this one stick out, and chances are you've already seen it. Maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, then this is gonna be perfect for you because it has the screen recording along while I'm reading. We're about to listen to username 666. Username 666. I worked for YouTube during 2006. I was a busy employee and uploaded videos there too. What I didn't know was why some of the YouTube moderators had suspended a particularly troublesome account. I was more so wondering why I wasn't allowed to visit the page rather than what was on it. Eventually, one of the moderators handed me a piece of paper with a written link on it. He then pleaded me not to ask about the secret username ever again. The link led to a user page. The URL was simply youtube.com/666. That day, I went home after work and typed it out onto my computer, finding that the account was suspended. But when I refreshed the page several times, some things changed. The layout became gradually more red and distorted. All of the video tags turned into the letters X666, and every single piece of text on the screen also said 666. I thought someone was hacking my computer, but I denied it and continued to refresh the page. Just then, a channel popped up, 666's banned channel. I looked at some of the videos. Most of them were crazy depictions of gore, smothered in distorted, swirled graphics. I decided to leave the video I was watching and went to click another one, but a blank pop-up appeared instead. I clicked an empty button and it took me to another video by 666. The video consisted of a woman drowning in a pool of blood and other horrible things happening. Naturally, I thought this was disgusting, so I tried to pause it. It didn't let me. It wasn't responding. I decided to close Internet Explorer, but it wouldn't budge. Going on another video didn't work either. I thought there was no way out until I remembered the power button, of course. I decided to shut down my computer so that whatever virus this was would relinquish its hold. But the button wouldn't work. Power buttons respond all the time. I knew then that I must have been hacked. All hope was lost. I couldn't get out of Explorer, and the video just kept going on and on. The girl in it was staring at me, all while random, horrible sounds burst from my speakers. At the very end, her hand popped out of the video box and crashed my computer. After a few days, I was fired. That horrid experience with 666's channel had affected me too much, and I could no longer work my job. That was when I thought of something. Could this actually have been made by the devil? Or was this just a joke to scare YouTubers? Either way, the myth was very mysterious. I hadn't gotten any sleep after watching those videos. I wondered who made them. The blogspot became defunct 2 days after the above blog post was posted. If anyone tried to access it, a message would pop up saying, removed by admin, error code 666. The blogger sent me his experience by email, asking me to post this on this website. He also left a note, never visit nor refresh username 666. Once you have finished, it will never stop. It won't come out. Not sure what he means. I just hope no one ever tried this. I always love the aesthetic of like old technology or technology in general, but I really like retro technology. So I really like that one. I get it. Like the whole corny trope of like forbidden, something is banned, or there's this file. I get it, but these are really old. These are really old. Overall, I like it. Did y'all like username 666 since we're on the YouTube website? Up next, we have a really long story, and that is Ben Drowned. Whoa, finally. I'm finally reading this. I know you guys have been begging since episode 1 for me to read Ben Drowned. I am going to read Ben Drowned now. I do want to say, first of all, I don't have gameplay matching up with what I'm saying in the story. I want to make that clear. So if you're watching the gameplay as I'm reading it, don't expect it to be accurate because it was a lot to edit already. The context for Ben Drowned is just that it's a haunted version of Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask being a Nintendo 64 Legend of Zelda game. The game is haunted and weird glitches start appearing in the video game, and also starts affecting our characters' mental health. That's really it. I don't want to get too much into it without spoilers, and the story is pretty long. So if you listen to it, you're going to get the memo. Let's get into Ben Drowned. Ben Drowned, Part 1, Day 4. Okay, Xboard, I need your help with this. This isn't a CreepyPasta, this is a long read, but I feel like my safety or well-being could very well depend on this. This is video game related, specifically Majora's Mask, and this is the creepiest shit that has ever happened to me in my entire life. Having said that, I recently moved into my dorm room starting as a sophomore in college, and a friend of mine gave me his old Nintendo 64 to play. I was stoked, to say the least. I could finally play all those games of my youth I hadn't touched in at least a decade. His Nintendo 64 came with one yellow controller and a rather shoddy copy of Super Smash Bros. And while beggars can be choosers, needless to say, it didn't take long until I became bored of beating up level 9 CPUs. That weekend I decided to drive around a few neighborhoods, about 20 minutes or so off campus, hitting up the local garage sales, hoping to score on some good deals from ignorant parents. I ended up picking up a copy of Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye, F-Zero, and 2 other controllers for $2. Satisfied, I began to drive out of the neighborhood when one last house caught my attention. I still have no idea why it did. There were no cars there, and only one table was set up with random junk on it, but something sort of drew me there. I usually trust my gut on these things, so I got out of my car, and I was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for a lack of a better word, displeasing. It was odd. If you asked me to tell you why I thought he was displeasing, I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There was just something about him that put me on edge. I can't explain it. All I can tell you is that if it wasn't in the middle of the afternoon and there were people within shooting distance, I would not have even thought of approaching this man. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for, and immediately I noticed that he must be blind in one of his eyes. His right eye had that glazed over look about it. I forced myself to look at his left eye instead, trying not to offend, and asked him if he had any old video games. I was already wondering how I could politely excuse myself from the situation when he would tell me he had no idea what a video game was, but to my surprise, he said he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me he'd be back in a jiffy and turned to head back into the garage. As I watched him hobble away, I couldn't help but notice what he was selling on his table. Littered across his table were rather peculiar paintings, various artworks that looked like ink blots that a psychiatrist might show you. Curious, I looked through them. It was obvious why no one was visiting this guy's garage sale. These weren't exactly aesthetically pleasing. As I came to the last one, for some reason it looked almost like Majora's Mask. The same heart-shaped body with little spikes protruding outward. Initially, I just thought since I was secretly hoping hoping to find that game at these garage sales, some mysterious bullshit was projecting itself into the ink blots. But given the events that happened afterward, I'm not so sure now. I should have asked the man about it. I wish I would have asked the man about it. After staring at the Majora-shaped blot, I looked up and the old man was suddenly there again, arm's length in front of me, smiling at me. I'll admit I jumped out of reflex and I laughed nervously as he handed me a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It was the standard gray color, except that someone had written Majora on it in black permanent marker. I got butterflies in my stomach as I realized what a coincidence this was and asked him how much he wanted for it. The old man smiled at me and told me that I could have it for free, that it used to belong to a kid who was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about how the man phrased that, but I didn't really pay any attention to it then. I was too caught up in not only finding this game, but getting it for free. I reminded myself to be a bit skeptical since this looked like a pretty shady cartridge and there's no guarantee it would work. But then the optimist inside of me interjected that maybe it was some kind of beta version or pirated version of the game, and that was all I needed to get back on Cloud 9. I thanked the man, and the man smiled at me and wished me well, saying goodbye then. At least that's what it sounded like to me. All the way in the car ride home, I had a nagging doubt that the man had said something else. My fears were confirmed when I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine. And there was one save file named simply Ben. Goodbye, Ben. He was saying goodbye, Ben. I felt bad for the man. Obviously a grandparent and obviously going senile, and I, for some reason or another, reminded him of his grandson, Ben. Out of curiosity, I looked at the save file. Eyeballing it, I could tell that he was pretty far in the game. He had almost all of the masks and 3/4 remains of the bosses. I noticed that he had used an owl statue to save his game. He was on day 3 and by the Stone Tower Temple with hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking that it was such a shame that he had come so close to beating the game, but he never finished it. I made a new file named Link out of tradition and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady looking game cartridge, I was impressed at how smoothly it ran, literally just like a retail copy of the game. There were a few minor hiccups here and there, like textures being where they shouldn't be, random flashes of cutscenes at odd intervals, but nothing too bad. However, the only thing that was a little unnerving was that at times the NPCs would call me Link, and at other times they would call me Ben. I figured it was just a bug, a fluke in the programming causing our files to get mixed up or something. It did kind of creep me out though after a while, and it was around after I had beaten the Woodfall Temple that I regrettably went into the save files and deleted Ben. I had intended to preserve the file just out of respect to the game's original owner. It's not like I needed 2 files anyway, hoping that it would solve the problem. It did, and didn't. Now NPCs wouldn't call me anything. Where my name should be in the dialogue, there was just a blank space. My save file name was still called Link though. Frustrated and with homework to do, I put the game down for a day. I started playing the game again last night, getting the Lens of Truth and working my way towards completing the Snowhead Temple. Now some of you more hardcore Majora's Mask players know about the 4th day glitch. For those who don't, you can Google it, but the gist of it is that right as the clock is about to hit 0 on the final day, you can talk to the astronomer and look through the telescope. If you time it right, the countdown disappears and you essentially have another day to finish whatever you were doing. Deciding to do the glitch to try and finish the Snowhead Temple, I happened to get it right on the first try and the time counter at the bottom disappeared. However, when I pressed B to exit the telescope, instead of being greeted by the astronomer, I found myself in the Majora boss fight room at the end of the game, staring at Skull Kid hovering above me. There was no sound, just him floating in the air above me, and the background music, which was regular for the area but still creepy. Immediately my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. Skull Kid never appeared there. I tried moving around the area, and no matter where I went, Skull Kid would always be facing me, looking at me, not saying anything. Nothing would happen though, and this kept up for around 60 seconds. I thought the game had bugged or something, but I was beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach for the reset button when text appeared on my screen. You're not sure why, but you apparently had a reservation. I instantly recognized the text. You get that message when you get the room key from Anju at the Stockpot Inn, but why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that it was almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. I started to navigate the room again, testing to see if that was some sort of trigger that enabled me to interact with something here. Then I realized how stupid I was. To even think that someone could reprogram the game like this was absurd. Sure enough, 15 seconds later, another message appeared on the screen. And again, like the first one, it was an already existing phrase. Go to the lair of the temple's boss. Yes, no. I paused for a second, contemplating what I should press and how the game would react, when I realized that I couldn't select no. Taking a deep breath, I pressed yes, and the screen faded to white with the words dawn of a new day, with the subtext, a bunch of lines beneath it. Where I was ported to filled me with the most intense sense of dread and impending fear I had ever experienced. The only way I can describe the way I felt here is having this feeling of inexplicable depression on a profound scale. I'm normally not a depressed person, but the way I felt here was a feeling that I didn't even know existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that seemed to wash over me. I appeared in some kind of weird Twilight Zone version of Clocktown. I walked out of the clock tower, as you normally do when you start from day one, only to find that all the inhabitants were gone. Usually with the 4th day glitch, you can still find the guards and the dog that runs around outside the tower. This time they were all gone. What replaced them was the ominous feeling that there was something out there in the same area as me and that it was watching me. I had 4 hearts to my name and the hero's bow, but at this point I wasn't even concerned for my avatar. I felt that I personally was in some kind of danger. Perhaps the most chilling thing was the music. It was a song of healing, ripped straight from the game itself, but played in reverse. The music would get louder, building up so as if you should expect something to pop out at you. But nothing ever did, and the constant loop began to wear on my mental state. Every now and then, I would hear the faint laugh of the happy mask salesman in the background. Just quiet enough so that I wasn't sure if I was just hearing things, but just loud enough to keep me determined to find him. I looked in all 4 zones of Clocktown, only to find nothing. No one. Textures were missing, West Clocktown had me walking on air, the entire area felt broken. Hopelessly broken. As the reverse song of healing repeated for what must have been the 50th time, I just remember standing in the middle of South Clocktown, realizing that I had never felt so alone in a video game before. As I walked through the ghost town, I don't know whether it was the combination of the out-of-place textures and the atmosphere and the haunting melody of the once peaceful and soothing song, but I was literally on the verge of tears and I have no idea why. I hardly ever cry. Something had gripped me here and this powerful sense of depression that was both foreign and crippling. I tried leaving Clocktown, but every time I attempted to zone out, the screen would fade to black and I would just zone in to another part of Clocktown. I tried playing my ocarina, I wanted to escape, and I did not want to be there. But every time I played the Song of Time or a Song of Soaring, it would only say, "Your notes echo far," but nothing happens. By this point, it was obvious the game didn't want me to leave, but I had no idea why it was keeping me there. I didn't want to go inside the buildings. I felt that it would be too vulnerable there to whatever I was terrified of. I don't know why, but I came up with the idea that maybe if I drowned myself at the laundry pool, I could spawn somewhere else and leave this place. As I zoned in and ran towards the pool, that's when it happened. Link grabbed his head and the screen flashed for a brief moment of the happy mask salesman smiling at me, not Link. With Skull Kid's scream playing in the background, and when the screen returned, I was staring at the Link statue from playing the song of Elegy of Emptiness. I screamed as the thing just stared back at me with that haunting facial expression. I turned around and ran out back into South Clocktown, and to my horror, the fucking statue followed me in the only way I can compare it to, like weeping angels from Doctor Who. Every so often, at random intervals, the animation would play of the statue appearing behind me. It was like the thing was chasing me, or I don't even want to fucking say it, haunting me. By this point, I was on the verge of hysterics, but not even once did the thought of turning off the console occur to me. I don't know why. I was so wrapped up in it. The terror felt also real. I tried to shake the statue, but it would literally appear right behind me every single time. Link started to begin to make weird animations I had never even seen him do before. He would flail his arms around or spasm randomly, and the screen would cut to the happy mask salesman smiling again for a brief moment before I was face to face with that fucking statue again. I ended up running back into Swordmaster's dojo and ran to the back. I don't know why, but in my panic, I just wanted some kind of assurance that I'm not alone here. To my dismay, I found no one, but as I turned to leave, the statue cornered me in the cubby in the back. I tried attacking the statue with my sword, but to no avail. Confused and backed into a corner, I just stared at the statue waiting for it to kill me. Suddenly, the screen flashed again to the happy mask salesman, and Link turned to face my screen, standing upright mirroring the statue, looking at me along with his copy, literally staring at me. Whatever was left of the fourth wall was completely shattered while I ran out of the dojo terrified. Suddenly, the game warped me to an underground tunnel, and the reverse song of healing queued up again as I was given a brief moment of rest before the statue started appearing behind me again, this time aggressively. I could only take a few steps before it would summon behind me again. I hurriedly made my way out of the tunnel and appeared in Southern Clocktown. As I ran aimlessly in a sheer panic, suddenly someone screamed and the screen faded to black as Dawn of a New Day and a bunch of lines appeared again. The screen faded in, and I was standing on top of Clock Tower with Skull Kid hovering over me again. Silent. I looked up, and the moon was back, looming just meters above my head. But the Skull Kid just stared at me hauntingly with that fucking mask. A new song was playing. The Stone Tower Temple theme played in reverse. In some sort of desperate attempt, I equipped my bow and fired off a shot at the Skull Kid. And it actually hit him, and he played an animation of him reeling back. I fired again, and on the third arrow, a text box appeared saying, "That won't do you any good. Hee hee." And I was picked up off the ground, levitating upwards on my back, and then Link screamed as he burst into flames, instantly killing him. I jumped when this happened. I had never seen this move used by anyone in the game, and Skull Kid himself didn't have any moves. As the death screen played, my lifeless body still burning, the Skull Kid laughed and the screen faded to black, only to have me reappear in the same place. I decided to charge him, but the same thing happened. Link's body was lifted off the ground by some unknown force, and he immediately burst into flames again, killing him. This time during the death screen, the faint sounds of the reverse song of healing could be heard. On my third and final try, I noticed that there was no music playing this time, that all there was eerie silence. I remember that in the original encounter with Skull Kid, you're supposed to use the ocarina to either travel back in time or summon the giants. I attempted to play the Song of Time, but before I could hit the last note, Link's body once again horrifically exploded into flames and he died. As the death screen neared its end, it began to chug, as if the cartridge was trying to process a lot of something. When the screen came to, it was the same scene as the first 3 times, except this time Link was lying on the ground dead in a position I had never seen in the game before, his head tilted towards the camera with the Skull Kid floating above him. I couldn't move, I couldn't press any buttons, all I could do was just stare at Link's dead body. After around 30 seconds of this, the game simply fades out with the message, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" before kicking you out to the title screen. Upon getting back to the title screen and starting again, I noticed my save file was no longer there. Instead of Link, it was replaced with "Your Turn." Your Turn had 3 hearts, 0 masks, and no items. I selected Your Turn, and immediately when I did, I was returned to the clock tower rooftop scene of my Link dead, and the Skull Kid hovering over, with the Skull Kids laughing looping again and again. I quickly hit the reset button, and when the game booted up again, there was one more save file added, below Your Turn, entitled Ben. Ben's save file is right back where it was before I deleted it, at the Stone Tower Temple with the moon almost crashing. I turned the game off at that point. I'm not superstitious, but this is way too fucked up for even me. I haven't played it at all today. Hell, I didn't even get any sleep from last night. I kept hearing the reverse song of healing music in my head, and just remembering the sense of dread I felt exploring Clocktown. I drove back to the old man's house today to ask him some questions with a buddy of mine. No way I was going there alone. Only to find out, there's a for sale sign in the front yard, and when I rang the door, no one was home. So now I'm back here, writing down the rest of my thoughts and recording what happened. Sorry if some of this has grammatical errors and whatnot. I'm running on no sleep here. I'm terrified of this game, even more so now that I relived it a second time writing this all down, but I feel like there's still more to meets the eye, and that there's something calling to me to investigate this further. I think Ben is something in this equation, but I don't know what, and if I could get a hold of the old man, then I would be able to find some answers. I need another day or so to recuperate before tackling this game again. It's already taken a toll on my sanity, I feel like, but next time I do this, I'm going to be recording my footage all the way through. The idea to record only came to me towards the end. So you see the last few minutes of what I saw, including Skull Kid and the elegy statue, but it's on YouTube here. I'm going to stay in this thread for a little while longer before I fall asleep to answer any questions you guys might have, or hopefully listen to your ideas or theories to help me shed some light into this, or maybe things I should try to do. I think I'm going to play Ben's file tomorrow to see what happens. Maybe I was supposed to do that all along. I don't believe in paranormal shit, but this is a little fucked up. Maybe this Ben guy is just a really good hacker or programmer. I don't know what to think about the alternatives if he isn't. That's the end of this copy-paste. I'm hoping that maybe this is some kind of running gag the developers had, and that other people have gotten gag or hacked copies of the game like this. This just really scares me. Part 2. Ben. I'm gonna post what happened and link the video footage, but last night everything got too real for me. I think I'm done messing around with this. I passed out pretty much immediately after making that thread, but last night, that elegy of emptiness statue, I had a dream about it. I dreamed that it was following me in my dream, that I would be minding my own business when I'd feel my neck hair stand up on. I would turn around and that thing, that horrible, lifeless statue, would be staring with those empty eyes right at me, merely inches away. In my dream, I remember calling it Ben. and never before had I had a dream that I could remember so vividly. But the important thing is, I did get some sleep, I suppose. Today, putting off playing the game as long as I could, I drove back up to that neighborhood to see if the old man came back. As I expected, the car was still gone and no one was home. As I was walking back to my car, the man next door mowing the grass killed the power to his lawnmower and asked me if I was looking for someone. I told him I was looking to talk to the old man that lived here, to which he told me what I already knew. He was moving. Trying a different avenue, I asked if the old man had any family or relatives I could talk to. I discovered that this old man had never been married, nor did he have any children or grandchildren even through adoption. Starting to become worried, I asked one final question, one that I should have asked from the beginning. Who was Ben? The man's expression turned grim, and I learned that 4 doors down, around 8 years ago on April 23rd, the man informed me that it was the same day as his anniversary. That's how he knew the specific date. There was an accident with a young boy named Ben in the neighborhood, shortly after his parents moved, and despite any further attempts to talk to the man to get more information, he wouldn't divulge anything else. I went back and started playing again. I loaded up the game, and immediately I jumped at the title screen where the mask flies by. The sound that played was not the normal whoosh sound, it was something much more higher pitched. I pressed start, bracing for the worst, but just like 2 nights ago, the files Your Turn and Ben were displayed. Truth be told, I looked at the Ben file earlier. It seems to fluctuate between displaying the owl save and not. I brought up the Ben file, hesitated for a moment noticing that the stats were not the same as they originally were 2 days ago. It seemed like he had already completed the Stone Tower Temple this time. Summoning my courage, I selected it. Immediately, I was thrusted into complete chaos. Sure enough, I was outside Stone Tower Temple, but that's about all that was expected. The zone itself wasn't called Stone Tower Temple, but rather STONE. And immediately a dialogue box of complete gibberish that I couldn't make out greeted me. Link's body was distorted. His back was cocked violently to the side where his posture was permanently disfigured. Link's expression was dull, almost monotonous. He had an expression on his face that I didn't recognize before. It was a blank look, as if he was dead. As Link stood there, his body spasmed irregularly, back and forth as I examined what had become of my avatar, and I noticed I had a C button item I had never seen before, some kind of note. But pressing it did nothing. Sounds played back and forth that I didn't recognize from the game, almost demonic in nature. And there was some kind of high-pitched yip or some kind of laugh or something playing in the background. I had all of 2 minutes to take in the environment before another one of those fucking Elegy of Emptiness statues was summoned, and immediately after, I was cut into the Dawn of a New Day screen. Except this time it was without the line subtext. I was a Deku scrub in Clocktown. This scene would normally play after the first time you traveled back in time. Tattle would say, what just happened? It's as if everything has... But instead of saying, started over, she finished her remark in broken text as the laugh of the happy masked salesman played in the background. I was put back in control of my character, but from a fucked up camera angle. I was looking from behind the door to the clock tower, watching my avatar run as a Deku scrub. Seeing as I really had no place to go because I couldn't see anything, I begrudgingly went inside the door. There, I was greeted by the happy masked salesman, who simply told me, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" And the screen whited out. I was in Terminal Field as a human again. I might as well not have been playing the same game anymore. I was being warped around, and there was no sign of a day clock or anything. I took a moment to get my bearings as I looked around the field, and immediately I could tell that this wasn't normal. There were no enemies, and a twisted version of the Happy Masked Salesman's theme was playing. I decided to run towards Woodfall before I noticed a gathering of 3 figures off to the side, one of them being Epona. As I approached him, to my horror, I saw the Happy Masked Salesman, the Skull Kid, and the Elegy of Emptiness statue just standing there. I figured maybe they were bugged out, but by now I told myself I should know better. Nevertheless, I approached them carefully and found that the Skull Kid was playing some kind of idle animation on loop, same with Epona, and the Elegy of Emptiness statue was doing what it's been doing all along, just standing there eerily. It was the Happy Masked Salesman that scared me more profoundly than the other 2. He too was idle, wearing that shit-eating grin, but wherever I moved, his head slowly turned and followed me. I had not engaged in any dialogue with him, nor was I in combat with him, yet his head still continued to follow my movements. Reminded of my first encounter with Skull Kid on top of Clock Tower, I pulled out my ocarina, to which the game played the ding sound when you're supposed to play your ocarina, and tried a song I hadn't played yet. The Happy Masked Salesman's own song, and the song that had been playing on loop back in day 4, the Song of Healing. I finished playing the song, and as I did, an ear-piercing shriek blasted on my TV. The sky immediately started flashing, the Happy Masked Salesman's twisted theme song sped up, intensifying the fear inside me, and Link exploded into flames and died. The three figures stayed lit up during my death screen as they watched my lifeless body burn. I can't describe to you how sudden and terrifying the transition from eerie to terror it was. You're gonna have to watch the video if you want to see it firsthand. That same fear that caused me to lose sleep 2 days ago started to grip me again as I was met with the text, "You've met a horrible fate, haven't you?" for the 3rd time. There has to be some kind of meaning behind that. I had little time to ponder as I was immediately given another small cutscene of transforming into a Zora, and now I found myself in Great Temple Bay. Hesitant but curious to see what the game had in store for me, I slowly made my way towards the beach, where I found Epona. I wondered why the game had decided to put her here. Was the game implying she was trying to get a drink? Unable to take the mask off, I decided that riding the steed wasn't the reason she was placed there. Suddenly, I realized that Epona kept neighing, and the way she was angled made it look like she was trying to signal a point to me off in the distance. It was a hunch, but I dove into Great Bay and started swimming. Sure enough, I almost missed it. I found something at the bottom of the ocean. One last Elegy of Emptiness statue. I went down to examine it, and suddenly my Zora started doing a choking animation I had never seen a Zora do before, which didn't even make sense because Zoras can breathe underwater. Regardless, my character choked to death and died. And again, the statue was the only thing that highlighted in my death. I didn't respawn this time. I was booted back to the main menu as if I restarted the console. The press start screen was before me. I knew the only reason why it would put me here is because the save files had changed again. Taking a deep breath, I pressed start, and I was right. The new save files told me about Ben. Now it made sense why the statue appeared when I tried to go to the laundry pool. The game must have anticipated how I would have tried to escape the day 4 clock town. The 2 save files told me his fate. As I suspected, Ben was dead. He had drowned. The game obviously isn't through with me. It taunts me with the new save files. It wants me to keep playing. It wants me to go further, but I'm done with this shit. I'm not touching any more of the files. This is already way too horrifying for me, and I don't believe in the paranormal, but I'm running out of explanations. Why would someone send me this message? I don't understand it. I just get too depressed thinking about this. The footage is up here for those who want to see it and try to analyze it. Maybe there's some kind of coded message in the gibberish or something, but I'm too emotionally and mentally drained to fuck with it anymore. Part 3. Drowned. I know it's early in the morning. I stayed up all night. I just couldn't sleep. I don't care if people see this. That's not the point. I just want the word to get spread so I don't suffer for nothing. I've lost the will to type about this. The less I dwell on this, the better. I think the video just speaks for itself. I did what you guys told me to do. I played the Elegy of Emptiness song at the first prompt by the game I was given. But I think that's what the game, or Ben, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I'm humoring the absurd idea that he exists in the game, wanted me to do. He's following me now. Not just in the game, he's in my dreams. I see him all the time, behind my back, just watching me. I haven't gone into any of my classes. I've stayed in my dorm room with the windows closed and the blinds shut. That way I know he can't watch me. But he still gets me when I play. When I play, he can still see me. The game is scaring me now. It talked to me for the first time. Not just using the text that's already in the game. It spoke to me. Talked to me. It referenced Ben. It talked to me. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it wants. I never wanted this. I just want my old life back. Stuff like this doesn't happen to people like me. I'm just a kid, not even old enough to drink yet. It's not fair. I want to go home. I want to see my parents again. I'm so far away from home here at this school. I just want to hug my mom again. I just want to forget that statue's horrible blank face. My original game file is back, just the way I left it before it was gone. I don't want to play anymore. I feel like something bad will happen if I don't, but that's impossible. It's a video game. Haunted or not, it can't hurt me, right? Like, seriously though, it can't, right? That's what I keep telling myself. But every time I think about it, I'm not so sure. Part 4. Jadisable. Let me just clear things up. I know you guys are worried, but Jadisable is okay. He finished moving out today, and he said he's going back home. He's just taking the semester off. I'm not really sure what's happened. I have a vague idea, but you guys probably know more than I do. I'm Jadisable's roommate, and obviously I knew something was wrong with him for a few days now. He stayed in his room all the time, fell out of contact with literally all of his friends, and I'm pretty sure he hadn't been eating hardly anything. After the second day, I couldn't stay in there anymore. So I've been crashing at a buddy's place, only coming into my room to get stuff that I need. I tried talking to him several times, but he would cut me off or keep the conversation brief when I asked him about his strange behavior. It was like he was convinced something was hunting him. Yesterday, I came to grab my philosophy book, truck and he approached me, looking awful, like horrible bags under his eyes. He handed me a flash drive and gave me specific instructions. He told me that he needs me to do one last favor for him. He finally explained to me what's been going on, gave me the account info to his YouTube account, and told me that he's getting away from here, that it lured him to play it again instead of trying to change things, and that he shouldn't have done that, and to upload the footage and inform people what happened. I told him that he could do it himself, and he got this wild look in his eye and told me that he's never looking at that game again. And that's the last thing he said to me. He never even said bye when his parents came to pick him up. I never even got to meet his parents. I honestly can't tell you what happened. When he spoke, it was kind of hard to understand him, and his fucked up appearance really distracted me. On the flash drive, there was the footage from the game last night, a text document with his name and password for YouTube, and a third document called the truth.txt, containing what he told me were his notes that he'd taken. He told me that this meant everything to him and that I follow his instructions exactly. Normally, I wouldn't be so to the letter for the request over a fucking video game, but the way he spoke to me and the way he looked made me know this was really serious, and I'm gonna honor that. I've had this video since yesterday, but had to have someone help me use Pinnacle. That's not really my forte. After watching it, I had to go back through and look at his other videos on the YouTube account to realize what was going on, and even then, I'm really confused. The video I'm releasing tonight and the truth.txt file will be released on September 15th, just like he requested. I haven't dared to peek at it yet, so the first time I see it will be the first time you see it out of respect for my friend. To answer your questions, no, I haven't tried calling him yet. I think I'll give him a call tomorrow to see if he's okay or not. He should have gotten back home by now. About the video. In this video, I cut straight to when he loaded the Ben file in the game. Looking back, I realized that icideMouse left the save select screen in because it said different names sometimes, so my bad for that. But all it said this time was the same at the end of his last video, Link and Ben. Nothing different. I wasn't there when he played it, but it looks to me like in the beginning when he first spawns, he's testing out his equipment or seeing what items he has or something, because apparently they've changed randomly before. Then, after that, I just think the game got too personal for him. Part 5, The Truth. Hey guys, icideMouse here. This is the last time you'll be hearing from me, and this is my final gift to you. These are the notes that I have taken and the realizations I've made. Before I delve into this, I want to thank you for following me and thank you for listening. It feels like the weight of a powerful burden is about to be lifted. By the time you read this, I won't be around anymore. But after spending 4 days with this maddening game, I have begun to understand what's really at play here, and hopefully after reading this, we can ensure that this never happens again. There are things I couldn't share with you while this was going on due to the circumstances, to which I'll explain. With Ben blocking any attempt I made to try and relay the truth to you, I tried, ever so subtly, to warn you guys in various ways. Amidst the chaos and my delirium, I devised to make a barely noticeable pattern in my videos. In all 5 videos I recorded over the 4 days, I have either had the Mask of Truth, interacted with a Gossip Stone, or the Lens of Truth equipped at some point. For the Zelda enthusiasts, these are all symbols of honesty and trustworthiness, and I would hope that one of you may have picked up on the reference. As I played the file, which I would name Ben, being mindful of how Ben was watching over my every move in the game, I made a point to avoid doing anything too obvious, but I sent out a hidden message to you guys. I never equipped the lens, nor the mask, nor visited a stone. It worked, and the video was uploaded. I prayed that someone would notice the pattern didn't apply to Ben. The tags followed suit too. I hope you guys paid attention to those as well. They were my little messages to you. Nothing big enough that would catch Ben's attention or make him suspect anything, with Ben manipulating and changing my files. I honestly hope that what you guys saw was close to what actually happened, but there's no way for me to know. This may be a long read. I don't have time to proofread or make all the research pretty, but here it all is. September 6, 2010, 11 p.m. I can't believe what happened. Not sure if this is some kind of elaborate hoax. Despite the fear, I can't help but be exceptionally curious about this. Who or what is this statue? A lot of questions here. I'm starting this document as a diary so I can keep track of everything. I'm typing up a summary of what happened so I can come back to it later. September 7th, 2010, 2:10 a.m. Summary was posted here. You can go back and look at my first post for day 4 for that. 4:23 a.m. I can't sleep. I've been trying so hard, but the harder I try, the more I just get restless. I just feel like the statue is appearing whenever I close my eyes. 8:20 a.m. Didn't sleep at all. Just gonna start my day. I don't think I have the energy to go to class today. I'm gonna drive back down to talk to the old man, taking my buddy Tyler with me just in case. 1:18 p.m. Back home now. No sign of the old man. Really weird that he appears to be moving the next day, but maybe the for sale sign was up there yesterday and I just didn't notice it. Tyler wants to know what's gotten me all worked up. I didn't tell him. Going to eat. Feel like death. 3:46 p.m. Could have sworn driving back from Subway that I saw the elegy statue buried in some shrubbery staring at me go by. Now, I definitely need sleep. 5 p.m. Don't think a lot of people would believe me if I told them about what's happening. Think I'm gonna try posting this on the internet. Think I'll just use a summary. These notes are pretty sporadic. 6 p.m. Connected my capture card to the computer to upload the footage. Thought my computer froze for a second, made this strange popping sound when I hooked everything up, but now it seems to be working fine again. My computer can't die on me now. 7 p.m. Footage is finished uploading. The quality is a lot better than I thought it would be. Guess this is a really special cartridge. I've never had it come through this clear before. 8:45. Thought I saw an icon pop up on my desktop that looked like the statue's face for a split second. Gave me quite a scare. Getting really unnerved and delirious. I'm gonna crash after this. 9 p.m. Begin uploading my YouTube video on an alternate account. 9:03. I don't remember having uploaded Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines video last year. That was probably the account I shared with a friend of mine last summer. I hope he doesn't mind me using it to upload this. 9:55 p.m. Posting my summary of day 4 with a link to the YouTube video. Gonna try to stay awake, but I'm so tired right now. September 8th, 10:48 a.m. I had a dream about the statue. I dreamed that it was following me in my dream. That I would be minding my own business where I'd feel my neck hairs stand up on the end. I would turn around and that horrible, lifeless statue would be staring with those empty eyes right at me, merely inches away. In my dream, I remember calling it Ben. Power of suggestion, most likely. And never before have I had a dream I could remember so vividly. 11:21 a.m. I really don't want to play this game again. I think I'm going to go back to see if that old man's there instead. 1:35 p.m. No old man, but I had an interesting conversation with his neighbor. I'll post the full thing with my summary of tonight's attempt at playing the game. Gonna wait a bit though and see if I can dig up any information on this Ben guy. 2:45 p.m. I've been getting random, inexplicable headaches due to the lack of sleep and keep hearing that song in my head. Also, it's flu season, so I need to be careful and not get sick. My immune system is gonna be shit right now because of that all-nighter. 3:02 p.m. My computer just, on its own, opened up a text document and wrote the words hi and www.cleverbot.com by itself. What the fuck? 3:46. I went to the website. It's one of those bot chatting programs. I think it's best I just let the conversation speak for itself. Conversation. Hello? Hello. Who is this and how are you able to control my computer? Who am I? Right. Forgot. You're a bot. Do you really think that? Listen, I know whoever's fucking with my computer can see my screen right now. Yes. Yeah. And I'll wager you're one of those IT kids who thinks he's tough shit. You know what you're doing right now is illegal, right? Is it? No shit. Are you familiar with the terms invasion of privacy? Get the fuck off my computer, kid. I am your computer. Cool story. Anyway, I'm calling DPS. You picked a bad time to fuck with me, kid. Should I wait until you play the game then? What? That game. Majora's Mask? Yes. How do you know about that? Because. Because what? I did it. Did what? I played with you. What the fuck? Were you scared? Yo, who the fuck is this? Ben, the statue. You're inside my computer now. Yes. How? You connected me. How the hell did I connect you? Cables and cords. How? Tell me about yourself. What? Tell me about yourself. What do you mean? What is it that really scares you? What the fuck? Answer. No. Answer. What the fuck? How the fuck did you just open that up by yourself? I am your computer now. How much can you control? All. What do you want from me? To entertain. You're stuck inside there. You can't hurt me. Ha. Question mark. Go play. No. You can't hurt me. Took you longer to type that. So? You're not sure. If you're so powerful, why use a ridiculous website like this chat with me? Less messy. More structured. Fun. Fun? Yes. Tradition. I like it. You think it's funny? Amusing. And my notes? You may write them down. Why are you letting me? It is amusing to see what you think of me. Window closes. 3:50 p.m. What have I done? I've invited it into my computer. I continue to write these notes, write my summaries. I feel like I'm a prisoner in my one place of security. I don't know. I don't know if I'm hallucinating or not. I feel like I'm fucking insane right now. I can feel it watching over me, even as I type this. Ben is controlling everything in the game, toying with me, leading me like a sheep. But for what? What's the purpose? I know Ben drowned, but why these hauntings? What the fuck am I even doing? I can probably even see this right now. 4:35 p.m. Summary of the Ben playthrough. 7:18 p.m. Ben called me to Cleverbot again. He tells me that he's sorry and wants to be free, and that I can free him. That's just like how he got on my computer from the capture card. He can spread, but he needs my help. He says I'm special because I can help him. That's the first nice thing he said. He promises to leave me alone if I do it. He swears he will. I don't know what to think right now. How can I even trust this thing? 7:20 p.m. I'm terrified of it, but now it's saying that it was just having fun. It's twisted and fucked up version of fun. He's saying that the game is over. I do want it to be over. He says that he just wants to be free, that he's trapped in the cartridge and my computer and wants to be freed. I don't want to have to deal with this shit. I don't know how long I can deal with the watching. It's watching my every move, every keystroke. I have nothing private anymore. It knows everything that's been on my computer. It tells me that if it wanted to, it could do horrible things to me, but it hasn't, so I shouldn't trust it. 8:01 p.m. Something tells me that I'm being played again, just like in the game. 9:29 p.m. Ben called me to Cleverbot again. I ignored it and went to go take a shower. When I came to my laptop, I was welcomed with an image of Elegy statue staring at me with those dead eyes. I don't want to talk to him. 9:44 p.m. Fuck you, Ben, I'm not talking to you. 9:56 p.m. Fuck you, Ben, I'm not talking. 10:06 p.m. Fuck you, Ben, I'm not talking to you. 10:12 p.m. Fuck you, Ben, I'm not talking to you. 10:45 p.m. It's been more than half an hour and the messages have stopped. Ben has stopped. I'm beginning to think that Ben isn't confined to just my computer and cartridge. I'm beginning to feel something. It's hard to explain it. I've never been spiritual, but there's something different about the air in my dorm right now. 11:42 p.m. I'm beginning to see the Elegy statue randomly as I search the internet in places I shouldn't. Places where he shouldn't be. I'd be scrolling down and suddenly I'd be staring at a picture of the Elegy statue. Always the Elegy statue. I don't know how much more of this I can take. September 9th. 12:35 a.m. My worst fears confirmed. Ben has tampered with my summary of ben.wmv. I looked at the summary that I posted on various forums for the ben.wmv file, and parts have been omitted. There is no mention of Ben existing outside the game. There's no mention of the Moon Children. How could he have been that quick to delete the post without me noticing? I'm wondering if maybe it appeared to me that I was posting everything, but in reality, Ben was posting his own censored version. I'm gonna ask Ben why he did it. 12:50 a.m. He isn't responding to me on Cleverbot. It's just giving the generic responses it usually does. I'm just talking to a bot this time. 1:24 a.m. I think Ben is mad at me. 10:43 a.m. The Moon Children appeared in my dreams last night. They lifted up their masks and revealed their hideously disfigured faces. Maggots crawling out of their orifices, sunken black holes where their eyes should be, a yellow smile that slowly grew bigger and bigger as they came closer to me. They told me that they wanted to play. I tried to run from them, but the 4 children pinned me down to the ground with surprising strength. Over them stood the Happy Mask salesman, announcing that he had a new mask that he wanted me to try. In his spastic, sudden movements, matching his in-game appearance, he took out a mask modeled off of someone's face that I couldn't recognize, a younger looking face, and handed it to the Moon Children. Giggling, they latched it to my face, their horrible, broken bodies bouncing up and down. 2 of them held me down while the other 2 began to sew the mask onto my face. My shrieks and screams caused the Happy Mask salesman's face to turn into the most horrific smile I had ever seen. He sporadically moved around, examining this procedure like a curious doctor in that impossible movement. I flailed around, but it was no use. My eyes rolled in the back of my head because of the pain. It felt so real, but I couldn't wake up. I couldn't wake up no matter how hard I tried. I just couldn't wake up. After the mask was melded onto my flesh, they began sewing my legs together. Then my arms. The horrific feeling of a needle puncturing your legs and pulling them in, rupturing your Achilles tendons and tying them together, resonated throughout my entire body. I tried to scream, but the mask was pressed so tightly against my face that it was my new face, and my new face had no mouth. I didn't make a sound. I tried telling myself in my head that I was dreaming, tried telling myself again and again, and suddenly the Moon Children stopped and looked at me. They just stared, and the Happy Mask salesman slowly bent down and stared at me, inches away from my face, and grinned when he simply said, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" Before the Moon Children resumed with increased vigor. I couldn't wake up. It wouldn't let me wake up until they crafted me into another Elegy statue. I woke up sweating, crying, and shaking uncontrollably. I immediately ran to my computer and went for Ben. September 9th. Conversation 1. Answer me, Ben. Welcome back. What is the point of this? Why? Amusing to see. How? Fun to play. Fun to toy with you. Make you feel safe. ... I wonder how you would have reacted. To what? If I hadn't revealed myself and stayed hidden, only doing little things to play with you. Close out your windows, turn off your computer, move your mouse by itself. Little things. Make you wonder if I am there, but you never know. Give you little hints that I am. I wanted to do something different with you. You've done this before? Yes, and I will do it again. To who, Ben? Did you know Ben? Won't tell that information to you. How did Ben die? You know. No. But did he drown? Won't tell that to you. Why? It is reserved for another. Who? Another who asks. When? Later. The window is closed. I'm beginning to think that this thing maybe isn't Ben at all. In its sadistic nature, I wouldn't be surprised if it took the boy's name after it killed him. 12:04 p.m. My room is beginning to feel different again. There's something out there. I feel really threatened. Like there's something that's trying to reach out to me and strangle me, but it can't quite get there. 12:46 p.m. I think Ben doesn't want to play with me anymore. I'll play again. I'll play the game again. Ben, can you see this? I'll play the game again. Please just stop this. Please, please. 1:41 p.m. I'm going insane trying to decide what is real and what isn't. Is Ben just playing a trick on me, or is this for real? Is Ben generating these replies, or are people actually posting them? Did I just see that screen flicker, or was it my imagination? Imagine on depending on the internet and trusting your eyes for your entire life and then being blinded. You can't rely on it anymore. You second guess everything. For the brief moments, I am looking at my responses to the videos. People were pointing out things that looked fake or photoshopped or whatever. And there's literally no way for me to know if Ben changed something on purpose to try to shut me up. Or maybe those replies were constructed by Ben to try to discourage me from even reaching out. See, I get caught in an infinite mindfuck loop like this, and this is what's been wearing on my sanity and pushing me to the edge. As I'm writing this, there's no way of even telling if anyone even cares as much as I think they do. Just another fucking trick. Does this whole document even exist? Am I writing nothing? September 9th, conversation 2. What is it? What's the point of playing? I die whenever I do anything. You die because you can't figure out the secret. What? Thematic. What the fuck are you talking about? There's beauty in your suffering. The window is closed. 4:09 p.m. Ben is making me play the game again. It tells me that it has something very important to show me. September 10th, 11:52 a.m. The drowned.wmv playthrough was up when I woke up today. I remember typing it up, but I don't ever remember posting it. He censored it again. There isn't no mentioning of the old man. I have no voice anymore. I'm only posting what he wants me to. I'm the mask he uses to disguise himself as he lies. 11:55 a.m. There's an entire video summary of a video that I don't remember doing. Reading through the summary, this sounds morbid, resembling my dream from 2 nights ago, except on a far more sadistic scale. These moon children, there's something more to them. Almost as if they're another entity from Ben. Something happened last night that I can't remember. I'm posting the 4th summary to the forums now. The shadow of my chair moved. 12 p.m. Ben won't let me visit YouTube. I can browse the rest of the sites, but he keeps on exiting the window when I go to YouTube. Why? 2:02 p.m. I'm feeling the air starts to constrict. I don't think I'm alone here. Whatever aura has been here is getting more violent. 2:44 p.m. I'm trying to contact Ben on Cleverbot. He's not responding. I just get the AI. 3:51 p.m. My ears aren't fooling me. I'm hearing the reverse song of healing. I keep hearing it. 4:23 p.m. Now I'm positive of it. Earlier, I thought it was a weird coincidence, but just now I went to open my window and 3 floors down at ground level, I saw the old man. I'm completely positive I did. The same guy. He was staring up at my window, standing in the middle of the campus. If any students took notice of him, they didn't seem to acknowledge it. That's where my notes end. I fled to my room, taking the cartridge with me. I don't want to go into the details of what happened. I'll lose my train of thought as I hammer out these last details. It's been roughly 2 days since then. This is my last summary and service to you of the final video you guys saw, Matt.wmv. The last video entry I made, Matt.wmv, began as normal. I was spawned in Clocktown as usual and nothing seemed to be out of place. Determined to set things right and play the Oath to Order on the clock tower on the 4th day, I prepared myself. I sped up time and got to the final day, making my way to the observatory. As I got up to the telescope room and approached the astronomer, he wouldn't let me look into his telescope. He told me that it would be cheating and that I should follow the rules. Despite my repeated efforts, the game would not let me do the 4th day glitch, no matter how hard or what I tried. I tried working around the game and doing the glitch, but it was adamant this time. Regardless of if I simply had the illusion of free will in prior games, this time the game became more aggressive than anything I've ever seen. It eventually told me to go to Icana Canyon, where the game would end and it would stop haunting me. Anxious and desperate to end this nightmare, I played the Song of Soaring and ended up there. I was told to check my inventory, that I would find the answers there to end the game. I arrived at Icana Canyon and saved my progress at the owl statue. As I searched through my inventory, I finally noticed that I was missing a reoccurring song, the Elegy of Emptiness. Obviously, once I traveled there and learned the song, I suppose that was the last thing I needed for Ben to decide it had enough fun playing with me. Ben is a manipulator. He tries to fool his victims into security and makes you drop your guard like a Venus flytrap. I am nothing but a puppet to him. He enjoys what kind of human emotions he can tap into by doing different things. There are still some things about this whole experience that still don't make sense, but then again, I never was good at figuring out these things, and I'm not exactly in the right state of mind to. I'm giving you all the pieces of the puzzle for you to analyze and piece together the missing links. I am typing these closing thoughts on the library computer on campus, and I've emailed myself the notes I have stored on my infected computer from the last 4 days. I'm then going to combine those copy and paste with the notes I've typed here on the safe public computer into one text document. I'm not taking any chances spreading Ben. I would not wish this horrible torment on anyone, and I made sure to have my bases covered here. I didn't run into any problems with Ben when I was back on my computer trying to email myself the notes. I guess that went right under his fucking nose. He's had no idea what he just let me do. I had no problems opening up the text document from my infected computer in my email either. I can't describe to you how it feels to finally be able to get the word out in this post. The nightmare ends here. That said, do not download any of my videos or anything about my videos. Yes, through a YouTube video or audio ripper, a screen grab, whatever. I don't know how he can spread, but I know that just watching them on YouTube and reading my text won't be able to allow him to spread. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed my help in the first place. But I strongly recommend you do not take anything you see streaming online onto your own personal computer. This will be my last posting. I'm putting this up on this forum here for the world. If you see any further posts from me after today's current date, September 12th, and after the current time, 12:08 a.m., discredit them. It already has proven to me that Ben can access my account and password and manipulate my computer. And like I said, I have no idea to what extent he can do this, but know it will do anything to break free. He is desperate. To ensure your safety, just forget about me. Please. And obviously this goes without saying, but from here on out, do not download any images I may have put up, any files, anything. This 5th day will be my last day. I'm gonna burn the cartridge and then come back to destroy my laptop. Again, even though I don't know you, this is sort of bittersweet for me. This semester, I really didn't have any friends, or rather, I stopped paying attention to them. But I suppose that's partially to blame because I'm the genius who picked to live in a single. I suppose getting someone to get a hold of me and save me before I got too immersed in this game would have literally saved my life. However, it proved too much for me. I'm just glad it happened to me and I could get the warning out so that Ben dies here. Lastly, thank you for taking the time to open this and open yourselves up to me by hearing my story, despite maybe not believing me. You didn't have to do that. Really. You shouldn't have. Your support this entire time has kept me going, and now I am finally free of this. Thanks again, Jada Sabol. Ben drowned, huh? A classic in the creepypasta universe? Community? I'll say community. Everyone knows that little Link character, the ugly one, Ben drowned. As we know now, I think more people know that little character as Ben drowned rather than the statue. Personally, I'm not gonna lie, guys, I didn't really like the story, but it was just like it's almost like that feeling of like, for nostalgia's sake, it's good, but it's all of these are corny. Let's just get that get out of the way. I say corny is the word of this series. I say that a lot, but I just don't know any other word. Cheesy. Maybe cheesy. They were good for the time. Let's leave it at that. That doesn't go without saying that Ben Drowned is one of the most like legendary creepypastas around. Now, let's head on to our final story of this video, that being NES Godzilla. NES Godzilla. I really had no idea what this even was, but when I made episode 1, people were commenting like, you need to read NES Godzilla. I ignored it. I'm like, that sounds lame. That sounds like so random. Like, what is that? I ignored it. Episode 2, people were commenting, you need to read NES Godzilla. I'm like, okay, wait. These are getting a lot of likes. Like, what is this story? And I found out that it's one of the longest, it may be the longest creepypasta story. I know someone's about to comment, actually, there's this book's worth of a creepypasta. Alright, chill. This is the longest creepypasta I've ever read in my life. What you are about to listen to, if you choose to listen to all of it, is 1 hour and 46 minutes of me reading this story. This story goes deep. And look, guys, you know how I just said like Ben Drowned is mad corny or whatever? Bro, I really enjoyed NES Godzilla. I think it may be my favorite creepypasta, right behind Jeff the Killer. This goes deep. It is kind of a slow start, but actually, I don't even want to show y'all. I made a part of NES Godzilla my wallpaper on my phone and on my computer because it gives me motivation. So I'm gonna show you guys after, so I won't spoil anything. But what I'm saying right now is that it is worth the listen. I don't really say that about any of these creepypastas because I think they're all corny. NES Godzilla, that one actually like affected me. I got emotional while reading it. I don't know if like you could hear it. Well, at some point, I think I like managed to not sound emotional but I got emotional during this one towards the end. This is a really good creepypasta, and I would say I recommend you read it, but I provide me reading it here. And just like Ben Drowned, the gameplay does not match up what I'm saying, but towards the last chapter, it does. I had to make it match up just because it was so emotional. If you're able to listen to this in one sitting, you're actually the GOAT. I would understand if you need to take breaks or just sleep to it. I don't know what you're gonna do, but what I'm saying is this story is worth the listen. With that being said, let's get started with NES Godzilla. NES Godzilla, Chapter 1, Earth and Mars. When I was a little kid, the two things I loved most in life were Godzilla and NES games. So naturally, when Godzilla Monster of Monsters came out, it was like a dream come true. Well, almost. To sum it up, most of the game revolved around getting through very repetitive outer space levels while smashing up tanks and jets and then fighting against Godzilla's monster enemies. Overall, it was pretty mediocre. But back then, I didn't care. When I got the game as a present for my 10th birthday, I played it night and day as much as I could. Unfortunately, I had traded the game for Amigon a year later, much to my regret when I found out what the game was like. Recently, I had bought a new NES system, and through a lot of hunting and asking around, my friend Billy managed to find a copy of Godzilla Monster of Monsters. I was pumped to play my favorite childhood game. It never even occurred to me to ask where Billy found it. He also gave me some other games like Legend of Zelda, Bomberman, and some stupid thing called Action 52, but Godzilla had to come first. So I started the game, and the nostalgia came flooding back like a tidal wave. Godzilla's 8-bit theme song flooded proudly through the speakers, and I was soon grinning like an idiot. Some people laugh at me for playing such outdated games, but I've never had as much enjoyment for any other games like the ones on the NES. Those 8-bit games take me back to when things were much simpler, more safe. But after what's happened with this game, I don't have those feelings anymore. I had forgotten how quick the fun of smashing things as Godzilla wore off in the scrolling levels. The game bombards you with bullets and things crashing into you from every direction, and you're too big to avoid most of them. Although my excitement had worn down some, it wasn't long at all before I got into my very first boss battle. My first opponent was Godzilla, an obscure squid kaiju who had never been in a Godzilla movie. The most annoying thing about fighting Godzilla is that he always backs you into a corner and starts smacking you with his tentacle, and you're unable to move until he gets off of you. The move doesn't do any damage, but it can stall you until the timer runs out and you have to start the fight over, and he regains some health. It's as annoying as it sounds. And of course, he did it when I fought him. Only for some reason, this caused the game to glitch up, because once he started smacking me, he never stopped. The timer is supposed to end the fight in about 40 seconds, but this lasted nearly 5 minutes. After a while, the graphics started to mess up, with little red blocks all over the place, which was weird. But I just took the game out, blew on it, and then started again. I wasn't about to let a little glitch stand in my way. So I started again, and this time defeated Godzilla and the level's other boss monster, Maguera, without any problems. So then it was on to the next planet, Mars. I browsed around the board and found something unexpected. Where Varen's piece should have been, there was instead a piece representing Titanosaurus. There were only 10 kaiju in the game, and Titanosaurus was not one of them, or so I thought. Perhaps Titanosaurus was originally intended to be in the game, but was swapped out with Varen for some reason? So I began to feel very excited. Not only was I playing my favorite game, but I was playing a prototype of some sort with a new monster. Needless to say, I ran through the levels as fast as I could to see Titanosaurus in action. Fought Godzilla again, and beat him before he could do his tentacle smack, but this time, the glitch started happening when he died. Godzilla's sprite didn't sink to the bottom, but instead seemed to be devoured by the glitch, and his eyes started randomly spawning all over the screen. I know now that these glitches with Godzilla were my first warning sign that something was very wrong with this game, but foolishly, I ignored it and proceeded on to fight Maguera, who this time had a glitch of his own. Maguera was twice the size he should have been, which startled me. He was also considerably harder to beat than usual, which is to say, not at all. But soon, I had defeated him also, and when he died, yet another glitch happened. This happened extremely fast, so I was lucky to get a screen cap of it all. But what happened was that the giant Maguera sprite started to shatter and melt? Also, if you look at the garbled text at the right corner of the screen, you'll notice what appears to be a bird in a cage. I still have no idea what that meant. At this point, I was about to fight Titanosaurus, and I was so worried as to what kind of glitches would happen this time. But to my surprise, Titanosaurus looked just fine. Although all the game's bipedal monsters were the same height, Titanosaurus was a bit taller. But since Titanosaurus actually was taller than Godzilla in his film debut, I thought it was kinda cool. After a very fun fight with a monster that wasn't supposed to be in the game, I took over the enemy base and proceeded not to kill Jupiter like normal, but instead to Pathos. Chapter 2, Pathos. pathos was the same as the Jupiter in layout, except the board was a dark blue rather than green. The first thing I noticed was that all the usual level icons had been replaced by a blue rock and some kind of orange honeycomb shape. There was one icon that had part of the jungle icon shape, but I didn't pay much thought to it. I checked the other side of the board to see the new monster. Instead of Hedorah, it was Biollante. But that couldn't have been right. Godzilla vs. Biollante didn't come out until 1989, and this game was made in 1988. Perhaps Toho put Biollante in the game to build excitement for the movie next year, but they changed their minds? I tried to rationalize the game's abnormalities any way I could, but this would prove to be futile. Pathos' map song was the first new song I heard in the game. Like most of the new songs, it was hard to describe. I'll try. It started out slow and suspenseful, much slower than any song in the game, but every 12 seconds or so there would be a loud crashing sound and the tempo would change. It was like the composer randomly played parts from 5 different songs with the same instruments. I moved Godzilla over to one of the many blue rock icons that had replaced the jungle icons and started the level. The level resembled a blue mountain range with a blood red planet in the sky, but there was something odd about the mountains. They had a shredded paper look to them. I thought at first maybe a glitch had affected it, but it looked far too intentional. I quickly noticed something else about this new level. There were no enemies at all, not even any obstacles. I should also mention that there was a point where the meter started to become glitched beyond comprehension, but it didn't bother me too much. I never kept up with game points. So without having to focus on anything, I listened to the music while walking through the level unopposed. The music had a sorrowful feeling to it. It would have been rather pleasant had I heard it in a normal game. The level went on for 3 screens, but with no obstacles around, I finished it very quickly. I tried other levels of the same type to see if any enemies would appear, but there were none. There was little else to be seen in the Blue Mountains, so I tried the other level type. I started one of the orange levels, and my eyes were assaulted with a grotesque background of tumorous orange eyes. The sky was the same as the ground, so I assumed the game was indicating that this level takes place in a cave. The only enemies here were Matango's spawn, but as you can see, the little bastards were everywhere. The music certainly didn't help, with a mixture of screeching sounds and loud drum beats that sounded like a monster's theme in a horror film. After completing it, I tried to avoid playing through any more of these levels whenever I could. The map was short, so it was only a few minutes before I was headed towards a rematch with Godzilla and Moguera, but this time their sprites and attack patterns were vastly different. I fought Moguera first. Moguera's replacement was a flying machine with a slight resemblance to a Pascagoula alien. It was a bit like fighting Mothra, only it moved with a lot more grace. It attacked by spinning its front tentacle like a corkscrew, and it still had an I-beam, except now it fired from the drill. This lanky aberration had replaced Godzilla, and the new beast was more of a challenge. It would run and jump at a fast pace, constantly swinging its arms and making it hard to get close. And of course it tried to pin me in the corner with as much annoying resolve as ever. I defeated it using a combination of tail whips and heat beam spamming. I defeated them and was gonna fight Titanosaurus. But when I started the fight, Titanosaurus was nowhere to be seen, and the game simply went back to the map with the Titanosaurus piece now missing. There was no one left to fight now but Biollante, so I eagerly started the battle. I was quite surprised that Biollante started the fight in her rose form. She was immobile and used tentacles to keep me away from the main body, which took the most damage. As expected, she turned into her final form after taking enough damage. The sprite looked pretty damn good for 8-bit. The battle technique was the same, except now Biollante could move, albeit slower than any other monster. Being hit by tentacles did more damage now, and Biollante could do an acid spit, which I managed to avoid by jumping in the screen cap. Not much more difficult to beat than Titanosaurus, it only took 2 rounds. But when Biollante was gone, the music had stopped, and there was a new icon replacing the bass. This icon wasn't there before I beat Biollante. It resembled a red tribal mask, and I had a feeling of dread when I saw it, but since it replaced the bass, it must be the only way to exit Pathos. I moved Godzilla to the square and started the level. It was a hellish looking place with no sky, and a flickering fire in the background. The fire looked far more advanced than anything I've seen on the NES. There was music in the form of a slow, steady drum sound resembling a heartbeat. All the text on the top of the screen and the life bar were gone. In their place was a single bit of text in the middle of the screen that just said, "Run." My feeling of dread had intensified. I cautiously walked through the level, but like the Blue Mountains, there were no enemies. I paced around for a minute thinking, run? From what? The first time it hit me, I didn't even see it. I heard a noise outside my room and turned back to see if something fell, and when I looked back, Godzilla was dying. I figured it must have been a glitch, but I wasn't gonna play through the game without Godzilla, so I restarted the game and went to the password screen. Have I ever mentioned how creepy the password screen music is? If you've played the game, you know what I mean. It doesn't at all fit the mood of the game. It's more like something from a horror game. Maybe they made it like that so kids wouldn't cheat. I was quite annoyed at this point because I thought I was gonna have to fight all the monsters again, but that didn't happen. The game started me off right where I was before I started the red face level, so I tried again, making sure to pay attention this time. That's when I heard a low bellowing sound, and then I saw it. This thing. Do you know that feeling your body has when you feel like you're in extreme danger? You start to recoil and tense up as the adrenaline flows through your veins and your nerves start to feel very cold. That's the feeling I had when I took this screen cap. I haven't seen all the Godzilla movies, but I'm pretty sure this was never in any of them. It had to be something the creators made up. But what kind of sick fuck would put this in a children's game? By sheer dumb luck, or perhaps the adrenaline boost, I managed to run fast enough to get away from it. It ran very fast, so much so that if you saw it, you were almost certainly going to die. And when I say die, I mean your monster gets killed instantly if the creature touches them. Once I had gone back to the map, I was so afraid that I was extremely tempted to just shut the game off and try to pretend this never happened. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It couldn't have been real. And even if I wanted to continue, I still had to get Mothra through this chase level. But as I stayed inactive on the map screen for a few minutes, my fear was replaced by burning curiosity. What the hell had just happened? What was the rest of the game like? I only had to beat this level with Mothra, and then it was on to the next world. But when I moved Mothra to the red face, the game registered it as me beating the level. I was quite relieved. I tried to prepare myself for the next world, Trance. Chapter 3, Trance. I was still pretty shook up from the last level when I started Trance. Trance's map music did nothing to ease the tension. As for how to describe it, have you ever heard the theme from Videodrome? That's the closest thing I can think of to compare it to. I checked to see who the new monster was, and it was Orga, a monster who didn't make his film debut until 2000, appearing in a game made in 1988. So much for my theories about Titanosaurus and Biollante. There's no way this game was made in 1988. Those guys at Toho may be smart, but I'm sure they couldn't see that far into the future. If they could, they never would have gave Roland Emmerich the rights to make a Godzilla movie. No, this had to be a hack of some kind, which just opened up more questions. Who made this hack? When? How? And most importantly, why? The why question was the question that bothered me the most. My immediate assumption was to think Billy did this to pull a joke on me, but that couldn't be right either. Billy didn't know how to make a ROM hack, and if he did, he'd probably just do something simple and stupid, like replacing all the monsters with crudely drawn genitalia. Unless Billy had amazing game editing skills and a serious dark streak to his imagination that he never told me about, he couldn't have made this. Is it even possible to put a hacked ROM into a cartridge? Aside from all that, my eye was drawn to a new icon on the map. A question mark. I was really curious as to what it did. I'm sure you're also curious, so I'll explain the quiz levels now since this was when they start appearing. There was one of these per map from here on, and they always appear near the start of the map. When you start on a quiz level, you appear on a screen like this. As you can see, there's a question at the top, a yes and a no button, and an emoticon in the center. I refer to the emotion as face, real creative, I know. And for convenience, I'll refer to face as the one asking the questions. The music for the quiz levels was a track actually in the game. It's the only one that plays when you try to use the Ghidorah cheat and get sent to an unplayable level. Face asks you 12 yes or no questions, and you move your monster to the buttons for your answer. When you answer, the question disappears and Face changes expressions for about 8 seconds. Then it goes back to neutral and a new question comes up. There was no time limit nor any right or wrong answers. Face has no respect for the player's personal boundaries and will sometimes ask deeply disturbing and personal questions. For example, do you like hurting people? Have you ever killed or raped anyone? Have you been molested by a family member? Other times he would ask questions that were either mind-numbingly stupid, is the sun hot, is water wet, or just flat out ridiculous. Does your dog like the president? And maybe once per quiz, Face would ask you a question about the game, with one exception. Face's expression changes seem to have no effect on the game, except for indicating what the game creator thought of your answer. His reactions rarely made any sense, and at first I thought they were randomly generated. The questions never follow a pattern. Face never stayed on the same subject for more than 2 questions. Early on, there were questions that made me think Face was building up to something, only to then ask some stupid garbage. Here are the expressions of Face I saw while playing. I'll separate them into 2 categories: the expressions I understood and the expressions I didn't. First are the expressions I understood. 1. Neutral, his default expression. 2. Angry. If you try to attack Face, his expression changes to this, but nothing else happens. 3. Sad. 4. Happy. 5. Sick. 6. Maniacal. Face made this expression whenever he was being an asshole. You'll see what I mean later. 7. Surprised. 8. Love. 9. Annoyed. 10. Confused. 11. Guilty/hurt. And here are the others. 2 of these only appeared once, numbers 1 and 12. and I suspected they might have been inside jokes from the creator. The respective questions were, do you like ice cream, and are you a tough guy? As for the questions in the first quiz, luckily I had a notepad and pen handy. I have problems remembering things, so I often carry one around to jot things down, and sometimes I doodle in it when I'm bored. So when the first quiz started, I thought I'd record what happened. I'm glad I did. Here are the first series of questions, my answers, and Face's reaction. Quiz 1. Do you like the game? Answer, yes. Reaction, happy. 2. Are you afraid? Answer, yes. Reaction, surprised. 3. Are you over 18? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 5. 4. Do birds have teeth? Answer, no. Reaction, love. 5. Is peanut butter good? Answer, no. Reaction, sick. 6. Does the moon rotate? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 11. 7. Have you had a job? Answer, yes. Reaction, confused. 8. Do you like hurting people? Answer, no. Reaction, annoyed. 9. Is the sun hot? Answer, yes. Reaction, sad. 10. Do you like dogs? Answer, yes. Reaction, happy. 11. Is the president good? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 3. 12. Does your dog like the president? Answer, no. Reaction, angry. Now that I've explained all of that, time for the gameplay. After the quiz level, I tried the new green temple icon first. Wow, maybe this is why the game was so weird. One of the designers was clearly drugged out of his mind. Jokes aside, I was quite impressed by the graphics of this level, as disorienting as they were, but I hate those creepy blank staring statue faces. The music had a hypnotic Indian techno vibe to it. There were 2 new enemies in this level, a flying ghost type thing with a trunk, and a bat with a horse skull for a face. They appear at random, but I was lucky to get a screen cap of them both. Then I proceeded to a blue mountain level, expecting another nice calm stroll. I took my time walking through and was completely taken by surprise when this happened. Not Maguera came speeding towards me and took off quite a bit of health with his tentacle screws. It only took me 2 minutes to kill him without having to worry about a time limit, but the boss monsters never showed up in the scrolling levels in the normal game. I was worried as to what other rules the game would break. After another blue mountain stage, it was time to fight Not Varan, whose replacement was one of the most bizarre things in the game. This strange creature attacks you by kicking, and also opening up his chest and firing heat-seeking missiles. I still don't get it. The missiles were sometimes a pain to deal with, but I found out you could tail whip them out of the way. Not Varan was probably the easiest of the monster replacements. The same could be said for Not Hedora. Apparently the source of the horse bats, Not Hedora, was the most aggravatingly difficult monster to fight yet, mostly because of his special ability. He could shriek and summon a small swarm of those horse bat things. I know there's only 2 in the screen cap, but every time he did this, about 10 would arrive. The AI took advantage of the distraction and attacked twice as fast while the horse bats were flying around. Once that annoyance was over with, I went through a green temple level to kill some enemies to restore my health. Interestingly, none of the horse bats showed up after Not Hedora was killed, and that was when I got an idea. If killing all the monsters makes the red face show up, what would happen if I avoid fighting Orga and go straight to the base? So I gave that a try. The game told me there was no monster there, and immediately afterward, the game took control of my Godzilla piece and moved it in front of Orga. My little trick didn't work, so I tried to prepare myself for another chase, but first I had to beat Orga. The fight with Orga confirmed another thing. Whoever created this game hack was clearly a Godzilla fan, not only because they picked a monster like Orga, but because they actually implemented something that happened in Godzilla 2000 in a really neat way. Orga's primary attacks were a punch and a heat beam from his shoulder cavity, but once you had him down to half his health, he did something new. He would expand his jaws and try to swallow Godzilla, in the process stealing your health and energy. But in doing so, he gave himself a new weakness. Firing a heat beam into his mouth would take a devastating 4 bars off his life meter. With that weakness revealed, I soon beat Orga, and despite how much I had hoped otherwise, the red face appeared on the map where the base was, and the music stopped. I readied myself as best as I could. I started the level, and seeing that it was basically the same as the first, I didn't waste a millisecond before I started hauling ass. I soon encountered obstacles in the form of the ground tile, suspended in air. Most of them you could jump over or destroy, others you had to crouch under. About 40 seconds into it, I heard the horrible bellowing roar and saw the spider beast following close behind me. Stacks of obstacles barely slowed it down. It would back up and then charge its way through them, smashing them into bits, and when the smaller obstacles got in its way, it would expand its jaws and swallow them whole. I was afraid, but with fast thinking and faster button pressing, I escaped him yet again. I felt really excited, and so I laughed and said, "Not this time, asshole." I decided to take a screen cap to celebrate, but when I said that sentence, just before the level ended, the monster did something that made my blood run cold. It looked at me. The wave of mortal terror overtook me again, and I sure as hell wasn't laughing anymore. I took another screen cap of the next level, right before I rushed to the bathroom to splash some water on my face, and to take a piss that I nearly failed to contain when that fucking thing looked at me. Chapter 4. Dementia. When I got back to the game, I was getting very upset and confused. I thought about the way the monster looked at me. The game couldn't have heard what I said, that's impossible. It had to be some random occurrence. But why did it happen precisely as the moment I insulted the monster? Nothing about this game made any sense. The new Godzilla monsters, the weird replacement monsters, out of place imagery like the green temples, quiz levels, and the red monster chases. It didn't seem to add up in any kind of meaningful way. If it was a prank, it wasn't funny in any way I could understand, and they clearly put far too much effort into it. If they were trying to make a genuine sequel with new Godzilla monsters, then why did they add everything else? Maybe it was some kind of art experiment, some group project made by a bunch of really talented and crazy people, and they lost the cartridge somehow? Or maybe they intended for some random person to find it. It was all just fruitless guessing. As far as I could tell, there was only one way to figure out what the deal with the game was: to play it through to the end. Maybe, just maybe, there would be something in the credits, an explanation by the creators as to why they made this, or it could be something much more cryptic and strange, maybe even something horrifying. Before I got a good look at the dementia board, I considered replaying Trans to see if the red monster would look at me again, but I decided against it. I just wanted to keep moving forward. I was also somewhat worried that backtracking might cause the game to become even more strange. The dementia board music sounded a lot like the Saturn music, except it was slowed down and played with a piano sounding instrument. Like most of these new map themes, it had a dangerous, suspenseful feel. While listening to the music, I looked at the dementia board. There were 4 boss monsters this time: Space Godzilla, Manda, Gigan, and Baragon. I was surprised that there were 2 new Toho monsters this time, but the best surprise was still to come. I started the quiz level. Here's another list of results in the same format as the last one. Quiz 2. 1. Can you swim? Answer, yes. Reaction, happy. 2. Do you like fish? Answer, yes. Reaction, sick. 3. Can penguins fly? Answer, no. Reaction, sad. 4. Can it spin in all directions? There was no clarification of what face meant by it, so I just guessed. Answer, no. Reaction, surprised. 5. Do you breathe oxygen? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 8. 6. Does it taste good when you bite a woman? I don't know who came up with this question, but I really hope they're getting mental help. Answer, no. Reaction, annoyed. 7. Is it night where you are? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 6. 8. Do you like cats? Answer, yes. Reaction, confused. 9. Is water wet? Answer, yes. Reaction, angry. 10. Have you ever broken a bone? Answer, no. Reaction, happy. 11. Do you like your job? Answer, yes. Reaction, hurt. 12. Would you like a new monster? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 11. I wasn't entirely sure at the time what face meant by new monster, but I couldn't resist answering yes, just to see what would happen. The result was mind-blowing. The game took me back to the board, and I had a new playable monster in the form of Anguirus. Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to play as Anguirus, since he was my second favorite Godzilla monster, and plus I never liked Mothra all that much. I moved my new Anguirus piece over to the level right next to it, eager to test out my new monster. Before I get into the level description, I'll talk about Anguirus a bit. Using the up and down buttons, you could choose whether Anguirus stood in a bipedal stance or crawled around on all 4s. It wasn't a huge difference, but being able to stand was helpful in boss fights, and crawling sometimes helped dodge obstacles and attacks. He could punch and kick like Godzilla, but no tail whip. Instead, he had something far more interesting: the ability to curl up into a spiked ball of death and roll around. You could still take damage, but it was lessened. It was a good way of clearing out stage enemies, but unfortunately doing this also drained the power bar. But the spiked ball wasn't his only special ability. When you press start, he would fire a beam of energy from his mouth. It resembled Titanosaurus' sonar attack, and if this were a hack, it may have been inspired by the roar attack from Atari's Godzilla fighting games. Also of note is that when playing as Anguirus, the level meter gets glitched up. Judging by the life and power bar, I'd say he's on level 10. Now onto the level. As you may have guessed from the level icon, these levels are green palette swaps of the ground and background tiles from the Blue Mountains. But what immediately caught my attention was the water, which has a transparency effect. Was that even possible for an NES game? I know the Super Nintendo could do it, but I had never seen a transparency effect in a game on an NES. The Green Mountains music was played with the same instrument as the Blue Mountains, but the melody was totally different. It was a very simple song with a lot of abrupt pauses, followed by a loud note every few seconds. Anyway, I went through the usual strolling through the level, and again there were no monsters or anything, but pretty soon I had reached a cliff above the water. There was nowhere to go but into the water, so down I went. The The water transparency made things a little bit harder to see, but it was tolerable. After going underwater, I encountered two new enemies, a giant piranha and some kind of spiky bottom feeder thing. I liked the piranha because I could easily tell what it was. It was a sane enemy design that would appear in a real game, and there were very few enemies like this. It didn't take many hits to kill, but they were quite annoying, and could considerably trim down your life if you got close enough. They also tend to travel in packs. As for the bottom feeders, they're easy to deal with. They swim along the bottom of the screen towards you, and are easily crushed with a roll attack or jumped over. In the screen cap, you can see me about to run one of them over, and there's a pack of piranhas behind it. After I beat that level, I moved Godzilla onto the blue castle icon. I started the level and I got a title screen with the text Unforgiving Cold. The level itself looked like a castle dungeon made of blue bricks, with rows of identical white statue faces on the walls. These statue faces had a permanent look of horror on their faces. There was also some flickering gray static, which didn't really obscure my vision, but it adds to the very unsettling mood of these levels. The music was a 12-second loop of a low-pitched choir vocalizing that sounded very familiar to me. Whenever I played through one of these levels, I got this sudden, horrible feeling of anxiety. I had the feeling that the further I progressed through the level, the closer I was to getting something unspeakably evil. There weren't any enemies, but these were some of the longest levels in the game. I only played one level, but it took 7 minutes to complete. I didn't want to admit to myself at the time, but I realized something playing the Blue Castle level. This game has the power to make the player feel certain things. I don't mean in the sense that you get irritated playing a crappy game or get unnerved by something scary in the game. What I mean is that certain events in this game can instantly make you feel something. I know that sounds completely insane. I don't blame you for not believing me. I wouldn't believe any of this either if I didn't play the game myself, but there's something very, very wrong with this game, and I still don't know how to explain it. So, then it was time to fight Baragon's replacement. Although Baragon was originally the smallest monster in the game, his replacement was the largest. It was so tall, in fact, that the ground was noticeably lowered, and not Baragon's head still barely avoided collision with the bar at the top of the screen, and he was just as frighteningly bizarre as he was huge. You may be wondering how he attacks without arms. Well, he has the most powerful kick in the game, but his other fighting technique is much stranger. First, he blasts a cloudy breath of pixels down at you, which causes you to freeze. Then he walks back to the right corner of the screen and extends a huge Gatling gun from his abdomen. That might seem amusing to you, but it certainly wasn't to me when I was playing the game. This attack is almost as annoying as Gigan's Saw, and not Baragon could have been unbeatable if he consistently used it. Thankfully, he only did it twice while fighting him. Once you unfreeze, you can run up and start damaging the gun, which does extra damage to him. This helped me to destroy him. And then it was time to play the third level type. I decided that I was going to use Anguirus to fight Manda and Gigan, and then fight Space Godzilla as Godzilla. It was only fitting. Before getting into the battles, I'll describe the third level type, the Arctic. The Arctic is exactly what you'd guess from the name, an icy tundra with a few watery segments. The music reminded me a bit of Northern Hemispheres from Donkey Kong Country in 8-bit form, a very dangerous sounding song. It made me think about being trapped in a tundra and freezing to death. There were two new enemies in the stage. The first was a creature frozen in a block of ice. They block your way, and you have to use the heat beam to thaw them out of the ice. They look a bit like a smaller version of Nagazora, only with one eye. When freed, they do a strange crawling movement and push you backwards. It doesn't cause any damage, but it's a bit annoying. After dealing with the Iceman, I kept walking for a minute or two and came upon a water segment. I jumped in, and this time I managed to get a screen cap showing how the water splashes when you jump in. Don't know how they programmed that, but it's pretty impressive. Another interesting thing is how the screen changes focus when you go underwater. Here you can see the other new enemy, a little thing I called Spike Walker. They walk towards you and explode randomly or instantly if you attack them, sending spikes in every direction. The spikes don't do much damage, but they did get me dangerously close to falling into the pit a few times. Oh, speaking of the pits, down into the water, the game has a platformer element, bottomless pits. There weren't any of this in the original game since it was strictly an action game, but the pits were a neat addition. After getting back on land, I encountered a very unexpected mini-boss, Maguma, the Walrus Kaiju. I know this game had some obscure monsters to begin with, but wow. Not that I'm complaining, it's a pretty cool cameo for an unappreciated kaiju. Maguma's fighting tactics were very simple. He had a freeze beam, and he could charge into you. Not very challenging, but certainly more entertaining than the Matango mini-boss in the original game. One really interesting thing about Maguma is that he doesn't die when you defeat him. He turns tail and retreats. This was the first time I had ever seen an enemy monster change direction, let alone retreat. I tried to chase after him, but he disappeared after I got into the water. Poor bastard. And that does it for the Arctic. I'll talk about the Manda fight next. I forgot to mention before, but the music that played during the new monster fights is reused from themes actually in the games. So far, the themes have been Titanosaurus, Gazora's music, Biolante, Hedora's music, Orga, Baragon/Maguera's music, Manda, Varan's music, Space Godzilla, Mecha Godzilla's music. As for the fight, Mondo was a fairly crafty opponent. When it realized one tactic was ineffective, it would immediately change to a different one. Mondo used quite a few tricks, like spitting fire, biting, and the most irritating of all, constricting. It doesn't mercilessly drain your life down like Gigan's cutter, but it was by far Mondo's strongest attack. One last thing to note that I found pretty cool was that Atragon showed up during the fight to help me out. Mondo crushed it with ease, but it was still cool. After I slayed Mondo, I played through an Arctic level for health power-ups, and then it was onto Gigan's replacement. When the fight started, I was very confused because there was nothing there. I thought this was going to be like the Titanosaurus fight in Pathos, but just about the time it would have been going back to the map, a piranha appeared on screen. But it wasn't there for long. As soon as it appeared, the speakers emitted an ear-splitting screech, and Gigan flew in and ripped the poor fish into pieces. Well, that's one way to get a player on their toes. That abrupt entrance scared the hell out of me and got my adrenaline rushing, which in retrospect was a good thing, because Gigan was one of the fastest, most unrelenting opponents in the game. Gigan was tough, but my new skills with Anguirus helped to even the score. This was still an incredibly intense fight. Gigan's attacks consisted of some kind of blood laser he spews from his mouth and a downward slash. I was expecting some hellish variant of the buzzsaw attack, but thankfully there didn't seem to be one. The howl attack was invaluable in defeating him. I would have taken more screen caps of the fight, but I really had to concentrate. After that, there was just one monster left to take down, Space Godzilla. As I mentioned earlier, I used Godzilla for this fight. Space Godzilla's fighting technique was rather frustrating, but admittedly a very clever idea. Space Godzilla would use his energy to create two flying crystals, which would reach the ground and become crystal spires. These spires would not only block you from reaching him, but also allowed him to constantly recharge to full energy, and blast you with a deadly, fully charged Corona Beam until you broke the spires. Space Godzilla would eventually drain his own spires of energy until they shattered, but if you waited for that to happen, you'd probably lose a lot of life. Heat beams actually seemed to re-energize the spires, so you had to use physical attacks. When you finally got close enough to hit Space Godzilla, he was no pushover. When I punched him, he hit me back just as hard. Space Godzilla does everything in his power to knock you back to the left corner of the screen, so he can create more spires. By the time this was over, I only had about 5 life bars left, but it didn't matter, because I didn't need to fight anymore. I needed to run. Here we go again. I decided right then that I really wanted to see the end of this game. As terrifying as these levels could sometimes be, I had to beat them to get through. I decided that no matter what happened, no matter what the game showed me, I was gonna get to the end. And I also made sure not to say a damned word while playing a chase level from here on. For this chase, I tried out Anguirus, since his roll attack allowed me to move faster than Godzilla or Mothra. The chase started off like the first two, except there was a river of blood below the ground. I was beginning to get the hang of it, and the extra speed from the roll helped me get an edge on the red monster, especially since I didn't have to worry about a power limit and could keep rolling endlessly. Like the previous levels with water, the ground inevitably reached a stop, so I rolled off into the blood. To my surprise, the hell beast didn't follow after me. It just stopped at the edge of the ground and grimaced. I guess it can't swim, I thought to myself, so I went under blood and continued moving. There wasn't anything around, but I knew something was up. The chase wasn't going to end that easily, could it? Surely something else had to show up, and sure enough, I heard the bellowing roar, sounding slightly different, and the monster was following after me in a new aquatic body. I had no idea it was a shapeshifter. After it reappeared, the chase started to get into the difficulty I had expected. Being submerged slowed me down, putting me and the beast at about the same speed. The only thing that would keep me alive was fast thinking and reflexes. I encountered some bottomless pits, in which mines floated up from. I assumed that if you hit one, it would damage you and knock you back. Considering how fast the red monster swims, hitting the mines would be instant death. So I went through great effort to try to avoid them, but that wasn't all I had to be wary of. Halfway through the chase, the Hellbeast revealed yet another surprise. A tentacle formed of intestine and tipped with a clawed set of jaws burst from its mouth, trying to pull me in and devour me. I only barely avoided both the tentacle and the mines, but I could just tell the beast was getting desperate because the chase was nearly over. And about a minute later, I had spotted a bit of ground that served as the exit. I leaped with all the might that I could muster without breaking my controller. The beast screamed with rage and jumped out of the blood river in one last attempt to drag me down, but I escaped its grasp. This time, I fell back onto my bed and took a deep breath, satisfied with yet another successful escape. Now, I was headed to the 5th world, Entropy. Chapter 5, Entropy, Part 1. In the original game, the 6th world was Pluto. Ironically, despite being the smallest planet, Pluto was the largest and most diverse world in the game. Entropy had a different layout, but was similarly huge and diverse. The board music was played by a violin instrument, a melody that started out sounding mournful and then it gets rather, I guess I would call it distorted. It made me feel depressed and unnerved, not something I would want to hear while trying to fall asleep. Strangely, none of the levels from the previous worlds were present here. Instead, there were 8 brand new icons. The bosses this time were Megalon, Batra, and Mecha Godzilla. As usual, the first thing I did was go to the quiz level for another interrogation from Face, but when I got there, I noticed something different. Instead of the usual goofy Ghidorah music, it was the password theme. The music change seemed to be intentional, because after the first 2 questions at the start, the quiz started to take a darker tone. Quiz 3. Do you like ice cream? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 1. 2. Do you like clowns? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 10. 3. Is time slipping through your fingers? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 2. 4. Do you have any regrets? Answer, yes. Reaction, hurt. 5. Do some people deserve to die? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 3. 6. Is it safe to go out at night? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 5. 7. Do you find it hard to sleep at night? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 9. 8. Have you ever killed anyone? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 7. 9. Do you want to kill anyone? Answer, no. Reaction, angry. 10. Are you actually accomplishing anything? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 4. 11. Does life have any real meaning? Answer, no. Reaction, love. 12. Do you like Mothra? Answer, no. Reaction, maniacal. I knew that last one was going to be a gameplay related question, but I had no idea what the result would be. I answered honestly, because as I said before, I never liked Mothra. Nobody liked playing as Mothra in this game, and there was a good reason for that. Every other time Mothra gets hit, she gets slammed back to the left corner of the screen, and she sucks at fighting because her attacks are so weak. The only benefit Mothra had was being able to fly over obstacles in some levels, so I answered no, and Face actually replied back to me, not only with the maniacal expression, but with text, too bad. I was taken back to the map screen, and I was shocked to see that Godzilla and Anguirus disappeared from the board, leaving only Mothra. Face had fucked me over. Needless to say, I was pissed, but there wasn't anything I could do. And I'm willing to bet even if I had said yes, I would have been stuck with Mothra anyway. Face giveth and face taketh away. I took a deep breath and got ready to explore. There were 2 paths I could take through the board. I decided to take the lower one. This turned out to be a good choice for reasons I'll get to momentarily. The first world ahead of me was a forest, so I started there. Almost immediately, I got an eerie feeling. There was something about this level that just seemed off to me, even more than the previous ones. Perhaps it was the pitch black background. I've always been afraid of being in a forest at night. Something about all those trees makes me feel surrounded and vulnerable, and the fact that I was stuck as Mothra didn't help. Playing the game's previous worlds as Godzilla gave me a feeling of bravery, being in control of the king of the monsters, and I'd be able to handle just about anything in the way. But it's not like that with Mothra. No feeling of strength or security. Now I'm just a weak, easily overwhelmed bug traveling into the unknown. Okay, back to the level. The music had new instruments, sounding like woodwinds, followed by slow, rhythmic drums and chiming bells. Gave me this feeling that I was intruding into some dangerous place I really shouldn't be. After a while, I encountered the first enemies of the stage, or at least I assumed they were enemies. They were strange, long-legged, deer-like creatures. Instead of attacking, they were just idly walking around. I went to approach them, and they ran away. I thought about shooting one with an eye beam to see what would happen, but it seemed wrong. These creatures were harmless, so I passed over them and continued through the level. About halfway through, I encountered groups of the deer-like animals, and also 2 new creatures. A sloth-like creature with a beak climbing on a tree, and hairy raptor-esque beasts that were preying on the deer. It was very surreal watching these creatures interact. I didn't feel like I was playing a video game, but rather I was traveling through a forest in some other dimension. The creatures ignored me for the most part, although the raptors did attack me when I got too close, or if I attacked them first. I know I shot one of them to help one of the deer creatures escape. I got clawed at, but confrontation was easily avoided by flying up to the top of the screen. After that, I had to choose whether I wanted to play the levels with the hourglass or the TV screen. I picked the latter. What I got was not at all what I expected. When I pressed the button to start a level on the TV screen like I normally would, this screen with an animation popped up. There was also music in the background, which was the goofy Ghidorah music that used to be playing on the quiz levels. I was somewhat unsettled by this because it was so strange. I also found it a bit spooky because I had a shirt that looked just like that when I was a kid. After starting the animation, you could go back to the board by pressing any button. After that, I had no idea what to expect from the rest of these icons. I went to try an hourglass icon next. I was somewhat relieved when an actual level came up. up. It was certainly an unorthodox looking level, all brown, with time measuring instruments floating around in the air, and gigantic grandfather clocks in the background. The music was the same as the board screen, and very early in the level, I encountered something else I didn't expect to see. Original enemies from the game. And not just that, it seemed to be a whole fleet of them, and the yellow tanks, which were normally immobile, could now move. I took some damage, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. But the most interesting thing about this level was the colored hourglass items. There were 3 of these. A blue hourglass that made time slow down and filled the level with enemies from the past, a red hourglass that made time speed up and filled the level with enemies from the future, a green hourglass that set time to normal speed and filled the level with the original game enemies. I encountered the blue hourglass first. As stated, the game started to slow down and I saw the enemies from the past, which were 5 different types of prehistoric animals. I don't know much about prehistory, but I believe all these enemies represent real animals. The level went into another segment, and I encountered the green hourglass, and then I fought the original enemies again. It was the same 5 types, so I didn't take any screenshots. But in the last segment, I encountered the red hourglass, and the enemies that must have been from the future. Now, whether or not the game was showing me 8-bit renditions of creatures that will actually exist thousands of years into the Earth's future, I have no idea. But with that thought in mind, I found this particular segment to be very eerie, and it was made more tense because everything moved faster. One of the future enemies bore a striking resemblance to something I saw in a book once, called Chudan Man. Another looked like some kind of organic spaceship. There was only one of the 5th type of future creature, and when it appeared, all the others ran for their lives, leaving me alone to battle with it. It could fly, but its sprite didn't actually move, and its single attack was firing a lightning bolt from its face. Even so, it was surprisingly powerful, and I suppose it could be considered a mini boss. After defeating it, it left a health power up that restored the health and energy I had lost fighting it, which was convenient. It seemed I would need all the help I could get to beat this world with Mothra alone. After that previous stage I called Time Warp, the next stage appeared to be a toxic waste dump. As you can see, the place looked grungy and inhospitable. The music was a short looping of an ambient synthesizer song. Listening to it made me feel like I had sniffed some toxic fumes myself, and it was messing with my head the whole time. I even felt like I was choking while playing this level. The enemies all seem to be mutated to some degree. In the above screenshot, you can see the green mummies with bird skulls. They jump out of the waste to spit projectiles. There's also a brownish cow skeleton monster with spider legs. Halfway through the level, I even saw one of the deer from the forest. It was alone, and when I saw it, it was drinking toxic waste out of a barrel with an anteater-like tongue. I was moving over to try to make it stop, but then this flock of skull birds came out of nowhere and started attacking. The deer was scared by this and ended up running off the ground into toxic waste. I feel bad for it. One of the birds bit me, but I regained health quick from killing all of them. They were rather weak. I pressed onward. Of all the levels in Entropy, this was probably the most normal, in that there was little deviance from the move forward smash things formula in the original game. I encountered more creatures through the level, like tentacled blobs and some kind of deformed thing with human-like teeth. I didn't feel like provoking them into a fight, so I kept on flying near the top of the screen, and I still had to deal with the occasional flock of birds now and then. At the end of the level was a large bluish-green lake, and there I encountered another mini-boss, some kind of a monster with a long neck and a whale's skull. It attacks with a mouth projectile and also by charging into you, and it could even go underneath the water and rapidly emerge from a different place. It was harder to beat than the boss from the Time Warp, and it had a lot of health because it must have taken me 3 minutes to defeat it. It let out a really loud noise when it died, and then sank back into the water as I left the screen. Back on board, I went to the nearest level icon I hadn't seen yet, which was a white tree. As I guessed, the level was a winter-themed recolor of the forest stage. But unlike the regular forest, I didn't feel unnerved starting this one. I think the music had a lot to do with it. It was a gentle, calm song. It almost sounded romantic. It was quite stress-relieving, and the forest itself looked much less ominous covered in snow. I traveled through the first segment enjoying the atmosphere for 4 minutes, when suddenly I realized something. I haven't seen a single creature since I started the level. Where are all the animals? Soon after, I left the screen and the next segment started. In the second segment, I was still in the winter forest, but now the music was gone. I was starting to feel suspicious, but then I reminded myself that there were other empty levels in the game, and this was likely another one of those. But then I heard something familiar. It was the 12-second looping music from Unforgiving Cold starting up. I could feel my heart sink as I came across this horrible sight. It was a whole group of dead deer creatures covered in snow. Judging from the backish blue tone of their skin, they must have all frozen to death. On closer inspection, some were missing body parts. Now I was frightened, but I still had to keep going. Before exiting the level, I was really hoping to see something resembling the previous forest animals in a living state. Sure enough, I did. It was a creature much like the beaked sloth. Except this thing had white fur and it was more of a beaked gorilla. It was walking very slowly when I saw it, but I was happy to see at least something alive. However, it didn't stay that way for long. A pack of raptors who must have sensed that something was still alive came rushing in from the right side of the screen. The beaked gorilla didn't stand a chance, as one of the raptors immediately lunged at it and ripped open its back legs. These winter raptors acted far different from their temperature relatives. While the other raptors only attacked while hunting prey or when provoked, the winter raptors seemed to have all gone insane. They attacked everything in sight. One was running back and forth clawing at nothing. Even the noises they made sounded different, more high-pitched and enraged. As I left the second segment, I even saw two raptors fighting to the death. They were both covered in injuries, and one of the raptors had been blinded in one eye. I took a screenshot, but I didn't stay to see who won the fight. I only had to get through one more segment before I could go back to the board screen. But in this segment, I was no longer in the winter forest, but instead a very empty grassy plain with a bright gray moon in the sky. The pleasant music of Winter Forest Part 1 had returned, and immediately I started to feel dread. This is gonna sound crazy, but it's the absolute truth. The game made this level from one of my memories. After a long stretch of nothing, I reached a lake, and then the moon moved down from the sky and began to hatch like an egg. When it did, a curled up humanoid figure fell into the lake as the moon halves quickly disintegrated. I heard a splash when it hit the water, then a moment of silence. Then the screen began to shake, and a new creature emerged from the water. And thus, I was introduced to a monster I call the Moon Beast. This was the only screenshot I took, as I was focusing all my concentration on winning the fight, and it was the most difficult fight yet, stronger than any of the previous bosses. This creature would have been hard to take down with Godzilla, and with Mothra it seemed nearly impossible. I suppose I would consider myself fortunate that the beast lacks any attacks like Gigan's Saw, because if it did, I would have never won this. I barely had 3 bars of health when I finally killed this abomination, but what happened afterward is hardly what I could call a reward. I've been trying to keep my promise and suppress this memory for years, but it seems as if I have to get it off my chest. This is a very painful memory for me, but the game already knows about it, and I think you should too. I'll just tell you the important parts because I don't like bringing this experience back into my head unless I have to. Back when I was in middle school, I had a girlfriend named Melissa. She suffered some kind of mental disorder that caused her to go into episodes. When she was in an episode, she would stand or sit perfectly straight and still. Her face would instantly lose any expressions she had before. She would speak very clearly, without any hint of emotion. When it was over, she would start trembling and sometimes bury her face in her hands and remain silent for several minutes. I can't really convey the feeling it gave me in words, and I won't try. You had to see this in person to understand. But despite this, she was a very kind person and I cared about her dearly. We'd like to hang out in a field at night and look at the stars. But one night, she didn't say anything to me at all. She just stared directly at the moon, trembling. I tried to talk to her, but she suddenly sprung up and ran right into traffic. I tried to stop her, but I was too late. She got hit by a truck and was killed that night. I looked her right in the eyes when the wheels went over her neck. That sight has always haunted me. I know that the game knows about this because after I defeated the Moon Beast, this happened. Chapter 5, Entropy Part 2. After that, the game went back to the board screen. It was all I could do to not burst out screaming, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the controller. I knew the game was gonna test me if I kept playing, but I had no idea it would go so far, or that it was even capable of doing what it just did. I could feel my brain going haywire, and I asked myself, did the game just read my mind? That didn't seem possible, but what other explanation was there? It was then that I could no longer deny what now seemed obvious. The game is alive. And not only that, it can also establish some kind of mental connection with the player. And yet, I couldn't convince myself to stop playing. I don't know if it was the game messing with my mind, or just my stubborn curiosity, but even with the previous revelation, I really wanted to see this through the end, even more than I did before I beat Dementia. Terrifying as it might be, even dangerous, I knew that if I quit playing, I would never be able to stop thinking about it. If I tried to restart the game, it might go back to being normal again. How many people ever get to witness something like this firsthand, let alone be able to take screenshots of the whole thing? Fucked up as it was, this was the experience of a lifetime. But even so, I couldn't take any chances with my health. I had the TV remote right next to me, ready to turn the TV off in case I felt I was in actual danger. And if that didn't work, I would pull the plug out of the wall or just run out of the room. Surely, that would be enough. Whatever powers the game has, it seemed to be confined to what it can show on the TV and whatever its mental connection could do. The latter was what worried me. I still didn't know what I was dealing with, so I wasn't about to underestimate it. I took a break for a few minutes to try to calm my nerves, and then it was back to the game. And speaking of TVs, there was a TV screen icon below the white forest I had just just left. And because the first animation was so bizarre, I figured I'd try another to see what happens. Although I expected the same animation, I actually got a totally different one. Weird. The music for this one was the Neptune board music. Fitting, I suppose, since it's a fishman and all. I can't help but wonder what the point of these things is. There was one more TV screen icon, so I figured it must have been a unique animation of its own. I was gonna make sure to see what it was before I left Entropy. But then it was time for another level. The gold brick icon was the closest thing, so I went to that, and I started up in a gold labyrinth level. My health and power were refilled. Not sure how or why, but I was glad to not be heading into the unknown nearly dead. I also noticed that my Mothra sprite had shrunk to half its original size. The music was a slow, ominous drum beat with female vocals kicking in about a minute into it. Quite haunting. The gold labyrinth itself was an anomaly. I'm not sure how this level would have played out if I was using Godzilla or Anguirus, because flying seemed necessary to get around the place. Another thing that caught my attention was that when you go left, your monster actually turns and faces left. That sounds stupidly obvious, but in the original game, you were only supposed to move to the right. So when you tried to move to the left, your monster ended up walking/flying backwards. This level was apparently gigantic in size, because every time I thought I reached an end to it, or thought I was gonna end up back where I started, I encountered something totally new. Things like lava blockades, new enemies, and statue faces. And I found one statue face at a dead end with a wide, open-eyed stare. The night Melissa died, she had an expression on her face that looked exactly like this the whole time. Even when she got hit by the truck, she still had the same expression. I can't help but feel like something really is staring at me from behind the screen when I look at this. I really didn't want to be reminded of that night anymore, so I left the statue almost as soon as I found it. I needed to find the exit anyway, which proved to be no simple task. It felt like this level stretched on forever in all directions. I must have wandered around the level for at least 15 minutes before I finally saw something. It was a creature that wasn't gold, seemingly the only one of its kind in the level, lacking any kind of hover ability like the other creatures. It just walked back and forth on the platform, but it wasn't long after I found it that a flying machine swooped down and grabbed it, and then flew off with it. The machine apparently had not seen me, so I decided to follow it to see where it was taking the creature. The machine stopped at a room with a large cauldron-like object in the center. The machine hovered over to the top of the cauldron and dropped the creature into it. The creature emerged from a hole on the cauldron's side, now adorned in the same gold color as everything else. The machine flew off. I'm not really sure what to make of this, but I'm glad I came upon it because I found the exit soon after. When I got back to the board, I realized that the bosses hadn't moved at all. A bit odd, but it didn't bother me. It made planning my route through Entropy easier, and there were still 2 new icons to explore, the Indigo Cliffs and a black version of the labyrinth. Since there were only 3 black labyrinth icons, which were surrounded by bosses, I played the Indigo Cliffs first. It was a lot like the blue and green mountains. The level graphics had the same shredded look to it. There's also a recolor of the clouds and moon from the toxic waste dump. The music, if you can call it that, was merely a deep rumbling noise. One of the first things I encountered were these multicolored creatures with big heads emerging from a small cave in the ground. They all made a synchronized shaking sound, and they walked to the right in a group after emerging from the cave, ignoring me. Having no other way to go, I followed them on their route. More and more emerged from the cave, until the group had about 100 creatures. Eventually, the pathway ended in a cliff. I was shocked to see that upon reaching the cliff, all the creatures began jumping off into the abyss. I've seen enemies walk off cliffs before, but I've never seen NPCs commit mass suicide like this. Very unsettling way to start off the level. I continued on, flying over various strange animals like the ones shown here. Another group of multicolored bobbleheads was jumping up and down, only to be snatched up by large birds, which I'm fairly certain are sprite versions of the giant condor from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. I defeated some of the condors in battle, but it bothered me that these bobbleheads seemed to be so eager to die. If the game itself is alive, perhaps the creatures in these levels are also alive, and some have very unhappy lives. But what provoked them to do this? In the back of my mind, I almost suspect that the glowing moon in the sky is the reason. At the end of the level, I saw yet another group of the bobbleheads marching up to a large monster and being devoured. This was starting to disgust me, so acting on impulse, I fired off I-beams at both the monster and the bobbleheads. I destroyed the cave. The monster became angry and ran through the remaining bobbleheads to fight me. Although it lacked any ranged attacks, it was relentless, but it was no match for me. I was in the home stretch now, up to the bosses. My plan was to go through Botcha first, then Megalon. After that, I would watch the last TV screen, play the Black Labyrinth before fighting Mecha Godzilla. And lastly, going through the chase with the Hell Beast. I was curious to see if it would be in a new form again. But first things first, time to beat up Batra. As I expected, he started off in his larva form. The music was Varan's battle theme. Whenever the game puts in a new Godzilla kaiju with more than one form, the other form always shows up. For a game that's otherwise inexplicable, it's rather startling in its consistency and accuracy with the new kaiju bosses. The fight started off simple. Larva Batra fought in a similar fashion as Maguma did, charging back and forth and occasionally firing off lightning from its horn. During the fight, I noticed that Mothra's combat capabilities had been altered in my favor. The I-beams did 2 times as much damage as they did originally. Now they were as strong as Godzilla's punches. The poison powder was similarly improved. It also did this nice thing where it would actually hit an enemy when you used it. In the original game, even though Mothra could fly, she was unable to fly over an opponent. You would get knocked back the same way as if you ran straight into them. This was strangely annoying, but not anymore. I could change any direction and fly around, which was a big help because fighting Imajo Batra is much like fighting a clone Mothra. Although Batra is distinctly faster and stronger, no longer impeded by its slow-moving larva form, Imajo Batra was a fearsome opponent. Although it lacked the horn lightning, it now had a new, more powerful I-beam. Batra could change direction just like I could, so this battle involved a lot of flipping and flying around. It was pretty damn fun, to be honest. So after defeating Batra, I was excited to see what Megalon would be like. But first, I went through an Indigo Cliffs level and shot through a lot of creatures for health power-ups. So about Megalon. His music was Gigan's theme. Makes sense since Gigan was his battle partner in Megalon's one and so far only film appearance. He was a lot like Maguire, but faster and with more weapons. He'd start out charging off with his drills. I liked to fly back and forth around him, which seemed to really annoy him. After a few seconds, he'd step back, turn around, and start spitting out grenades. Those were a pain because they bounced when they hit the ground. Lastly, he started spamming his lightning beam. It only went straight forward, so it was easy to duck under it and then shoot him with I-beams. Overall, I describe him as strong, persistent, but dumb. I was now nearing the end of Entropy. I had just taken down Megalon, and I started up the last TV screen to see what I'd get this time. The result was unpleasant. The music for this gruesome scene was the password theme. I couldn't figure out why this animation was so sinister and violent in comparison to the other two. The whole game seemed to be growing more malevolent. As I went on to finish Entropy, I began to feel drained. It's hard to describe. Like I had suddenly became tired when I wasn't before. Most likely it was just the tension from all that had happened in this game getting to me, but who knows. The last level type on Entropy is what I call the Shadow Labyrinth. The scenery was recolored from gold to black. The music was an evil ambience, similar to the unforgiving Cold Loop, but distinctly different. The music was my first sign that this level was going to be distressing. I traveled through the maze for about a minute, and I noticed there weren't any creatures hovering around. It was an odd transition from the Gold Labyrinth, which was overrun with creatures. But then, this might be a good thing. Maybe there wouldn't be any obstacles and I could get through the level with ease. Then, the screen went dark, and immediately I snapped out of my daze from a few seconds earlier. Everything had been darkened so that the only thing I could see was the Mothra sprite. I couldn't tell where I was going, and I ended up frantically running into walls. I heard a noise, the sound of a crowd running through a hallway, and alongside the running came the roars, loud roaring sounds, which I would describe something like a rabid dog the size of an elephant screaming with fury. And I could tell that whatever was making this noise, there were lots of them. I knew there was something there, but it wasn't until I did some screen cap editing that I got to see what my pursuers looked like. But at the time, I couldn't see where they were or where I was going. I was literally running blind, and this mob of beasts eventually caught up with me. All I could think of was no, as I saw my life bar rapidly declining. The monsters had taken me down to half my total health when I was saved. The light came back on and the attackers disappeared. And so the challenge of this level was revealed. Find the exit before the lights go out and a pack of monsters maul you to death. I was in panic mode now, moving as fast as I could go while trying every path I could find for a way out. As I played through this level, the lights went out a total of 3 times. The second time, I would have been dead meat had it not been for one of the wide-eyed statues. As I stayed close to it, the monsters seemed to avoid me until the lights came back. The statue warded them away somehow. I was safe as long as I stayed near the statue, but at the same time, I had to leave to find the exit. The Shadow Labyrinth turned out to be much smaller than the Gold Labyrinth, as it was only about 6 minutes to navigate to the end. But before the exit, there was a row of halls leading straight down, with no way out once entered. You either got to the exit before the monsters reached you, or you died. Thankfully, I made it out. Only one more boss, Mecha Godzilla. I started the battle, and got something unexpected. Not only did my life shoot back up to 100% again, it seems to do that randomly, but instead of a replacement boss, I was fighting Godzilla. But any Godzilla fan worth their salt can figure this out. Mecha Godzilla started off like fighting a clone Godzilla, but his disguise burned away after only 3 life bars. Usually a transformation only occurred at the halfway point. At this point, it was like fighting Mecha Godzilla in the normal game. Felt kinda nice to fight one of the original game enemies for a change. Although he wasn't exactly like normal. He also had a rainbow beam and finger missiles. This prevented me from doing the old trick of backing him in the corner and hitting him with I-beams in a spot where he can't hit me, but that was always a cheap trick anyways. But after getting him down to half his health, something weird started to happen. His sprite started to glitch, in much the same way as Godzilla had back in the first world. After a few seconds, the glitches began to form a new shape, and thus the game had created not Mecha Godzilla. And I discovered that this visual glitch was somehow related to the game recreating things. The human face on this one gives it a very uncanny look. It was one of the stronger replacement monsters, and had the most firepower. Pictured here is its mouth beam, which I got caught in the middle of. Even though it was a bit stronger, it was slower than its original counterpart and couldn't jump as much. I won the fight by constantly staying out of its line of fire, bombarding the machine with poison powder as I flew over it. One last thing to do, the Hell Beast chase. Oh boy. Might as well just get this over with, I thought. The Entropy End chase ended up being exactly what I was afraid it would be, a labyrinth level. All the other chases, although difficult, were extremely straightforward. You just had to run to the right and not get touched. But this took all the simplicity out of it. There was no telling how big this labyrinth would be, or where the exit was. And now not only did I have to constantly backtrack to find my way out, but I also had to avoid getting one hit killed by the red monster. And for those first 30 seconds, it didn't show up, but I knew it would. And as I started picking up the pace, I heard a loud flapping noise, and there it was, in a flying form. It flew with bat-like wings, and was as fast and relentless as ever. For reasons already stated, this was probably the most nerve-wracking of all the end chases, and as such, I had to keep my focus on the game, and not taking screen caps. However, I did take one of the red monster, doing something I found very interesting. I had managed to lose it by going through a different path than it apparently expected, and it was blocked from attacking me by one of the organic walls in the red labyrinth, or so I thought. It tried clawing through the wall for a second before opening its mouth and tearing the wall apart with its intestine jaws. But those brief milliseconds that the monster was held back might have been the key to me finding the exit. The path to exit was long and complex, but from what I remember, I went up and then back towards the left. I'm still not sure why I chose that particular way. Just a lucky hunch, I suppose. I was sweating profusely, but my luck had saved me yet again. I hoped that it wouldn't run out before I finished the game. There were only 2 more worlds to go. Next was the penultimate world, called Extus. Chapter 6, Extus. In the brief instant before the transition between Entropy and Extus, I was hoping that I would get Godzilla and Anguirus back. As the board appeared, I saw that my wish was half granted. I had Godzilla back, but no Anguirus. I would have preferred both, but despite Anguirus' neat abilities, I would have chosen Godzilla if I had to pick between the two. Extus had 2 different colored temples, white and pink, a pyramid, what looked like some modern buildings, and 2 other icons I couldn't figure out at the time. New bosses were Kamanga, Gorosaurus, and not Ghidorah, whom I was dreading to see, let alone fight. With Godzilla back, I was excited again and eager to explore, yet still cautious. I went to the quiz level first, just as before. This time, Face's questions were more random than ever. Quiz 4. 1. Do elephants breathe? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 2. 2. Have you ever been molested by a family member? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 6. 3. Have you ever raped anyone? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 8. 4. Is green your favorite color? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 10. 5. Is the computer the pinnacle of modern technology? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 4. 6. Are you a tough guy? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 12. 7. Can you fly? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 9. 6. Can you stand on your head? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 7. 9. Do you hate raccoons? Answer, no. Reaction, confused. 10. Do you feel blame? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 11. 11. Would you like a new monster? Answer, yes. Reaction, surprised. 12. Will you miss me? Answer, yes. Reaction, sad. I was happy that I was getting a new monster, but that last question bothered me. Will you miss me? Is Face referring to when I finished the game, I thought? Since the revelation of the game's truly otherworldly nature, I wasn't sure what to think of Face or anything else in the game. But something about that last statement gave me a genuine feeling of sadness from Face. As I was thinking about this, the game had gone back to the board. I had a new monster, but I had no idea who it was supposed to be. The sprite had a slight resemblance to Rodin, but the head was totally off. I moved this mysterious newcomer to a white temple icon and started the level. When I started the level, this screen appeared with the text, "Find the gem," presumably instructions for beating the level. After that, I got my first look at my new playable character, a hairy, dark blue creature with bat wings and a skull-like face named Solomon. And I also found that my path was blocked by a beam of light and a small pillar with a plate on it. I figured that this beam of light was blocking the exit, so I have to find the gem and drop it on the plate to deactivate the beam. How exactly was I going to do that? I didn't know. There wasn't anything in the original game requiring you to find an item to beat a level. I'd have to find out when I obtained the gem. The only direction I had to go was left, so I proceeded. Solomon was an interesting monster, to say the least. He was capable of both flight and a heat beam, both of which proved to be very useful. He could also kick and slash with his wings, but he couldn't duck. The White Temple's music was a vocalizing choir, or a video game approximation of such. It's hard to describe, but it had a very holy sound to it. It wasn't long before I started running into waves of strange new enemies. They did little to stop me. I ran past them while slashing and didn't take any damage. There was a pause between each wave of enemies. After you had killed about 10, there wouldn't be any for about a minute. Then the next wave would appear. After 5 minutes, I noticed holes in the floor and ceiling. Guillotine-mouthed creatures were rapidly flying up and down these crevices, so I had to time my jumps carefully, because I didn't know if I'd get another shot at this. Luckily, I managed to get through without a scratch. I'm just lucky, I guess. After that, I found myself at the end of the hallway, facing some kind of mini-boss monster. It moved fast and had some kind of projectile that it shot in 4 directions, but I killed it quite easily using Solomon's heat beam. When the battle was over, I had my gem, which was inside the creature's head. I found that I could pick up and hold the gem by walking over to it and holding down B. I made the long trek back to the start, deposited the gem on the plate, which deactivated the beam. I left the stage and was shown what was probably the strangest quirk relating to the Solomon character. Every time you complete a stage or defeat a boss with Solomon, this screen appears. I have no idea what "still the best 1973" means. Neither the date nor the phrase has any meaning or significance to me that I can think of, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. The next level I played was one that I call Bronze Pyramids. I used Godzilla, and found he had been leveled up to 12 since I last played him in Dementia. The Bronze Pyramids were fairly normal as far as these levels go, but the visuals were quite interesting, almost unusually colorful and lively. The music had a fittingly Egyptian style to it. It was slow and mysterious sounding. I strolled through the level, fighting off the various enemies. None were too difficult, although the ants could be a pain if you ran into too many at once. My favorite enemy was this giant reptile I encountered halfway through. At the end of the level, I came to a giant pyramid, and I engaged in yet another mini boss fight. Although this one was a bit different, because I had to fight 2 of these monsters at the same time. Individually, I could have dealt with them easily, but fighting both of them at once was challenging. But I sped things up by tricking one of the twin beasts into barbecuing his brother by jumping when he uses flame breath. After defeating the twin monsters, I noticed something strange after returning to the board. I was now able to move my monster piece anywhere on the board without limits. Normally, Godzilla could only move 3 spaces each turn, and Mothra could move 5. I wanted to try out Solomon some more, so I moved this piece over to one of the brown pillar looking icons with colored dots and started the level. When I got to the level, I then realized what the level icon represented: totem poles. I was greeted by 2 of them right at the beginning. The music had a Native American sound to it. It seemed to be using the same instruments as the Entropy Forest. It was noticeably different, but just as foreboding. I walked around for 3 minutes with nothing else in sight besides the totem poles. I didn't realize it until then, but I wasn't expecting another level with nothing alive in it. After all the activity in Entropy, walking by all those multicolored faces, this unnerving level left me feeling like I was being watched. Only about 10 minutes after starting Exodus, I was already halfway through. After getting back from the totem pole level, I tried out one of the TV screens to see how strange they were this time. Even more strange than before, apparently. The music for this was the Uranus theme. I switched back to Godzilla to play another level, and this level was quite a surprise. It was a normal city level. The colors were gloomy, but even still, this was quite a shock. This was the kind of level I would expect to see in a Godzilla game, and I was kinda mad I didn't get to play it earlier. The music was the Earth theme. I found it strange that a level fitting a Godzilla game would show up this late, but there's no point in crying over spilt milk, I suppose. I moved Solomon over to a grayish green icon, which turned out to be a giant high-tech laboratory of some sort. Lots of mechanical drones in this level, but Solomon cleared through them just like the White Temple enemies. The music was a gritty industrial beat. There was also a strange flying cyborg enemy, which was annoying because it would fly away when you jump to attack it. Also of interest were these large stasis tanks holding some kind of monster inside. As you would guess, sometimes the monsters awaken and shatter through the glass. I tried to get past the stasis tanks as fast as possible because the monsters inside proved to be vicious little bastards upon release. At the end of the level was an elevator, which I used to go down to the bottom where the exit was. Along the way, I was shot at by security drones. I couldn't leave the elevator, so my only defense was the heat beam. The last level type was this simple thing I called the Heart Temple for obvious reasons. Nothing but a big hallway filled with floating enemies shaped like human hearts. They're incapable of causing you damage, so what you do is you run through the level, smashing as many as you can to get all the power-ups. One run through these levels could get the life meter back up to full, and I would greatly appreciate these levels later. The Heart Temple's music reminded me of a circus tune. It had an overly cheerful sound to it, which gave the level a really weird feeling. Having seen all the level types, I chose to fight Gorosaurus using Solomon. The music for this fight was Gozora's theme. It was during this fight I realized that Solomon is overpowered. A single well-aimed slash can take down as many as 4 of the enemy's life bars. Due to this, the fight was over pretty quickly. Gorosaurus had no projectile attacks or anything else that could match Solomon's deadly claws, but I kept the fight going just long enough to see if Gorosaurus would use his iconic kangaroo kick, and I was greatly pleased when he did. Even though I knew Solomon was my fighting ace, I used Godzilla to battle Kamanga, just for variety. I briefly considered using Mothra, but of course Godzilla won out. Kamanga was also a simple opponent. No heat beams or anything, he attacks by jumping on you, stabbing with his mandibles, and also uses his signature webbing stream to paralyze you. Once you get webbed, Kamanga will sometimes take the opportunity to attack, but it's mostly a way to buy some time, like Gazora backing you into the corner until the time runs out. His music was Hedorah's theme. With Gorosaurus and Kamanga defeated, I was at the end of Exodus. Before I fought not Ghidorah, there was something I had to do. I wasn't expecting much from it, but for documentation's sake, I took a look at the other TV screen. This is what it was. I don't think there was ever much reason behind the TV screens. If I were to guess, I'd say it's some random, uncontrolled manifestation of the cartridge's abilities. Or maybe all this makes perfect sense to the game. Who knows? Anyway, Mr. Fawcett's theme was the Saturn music. It was time for the opponent I had been dreading, not Ghidorah. Although I had gained courage with Solomon's combat advantages, I was still nervous, and when I started the fight, I was immediately confused. My opponent was not Ghidorah. I defeated the imposter with a few strikes, and then Not Maguera appeared. Then it made sense. In order to get to Not Ghidorah, I had to battle the previous replacements first, and battle them I did. I tore my way through them until I finally made it to Not Ghidorah, who was a Dorit. Once I stopped laughing, I destroyed him with only 2 slashes. The music stopped, and I thought I was going back to the board, but the battle wasn't over yet. The real fight was against Chimera, a monstrous hybrid of all the replacement beasts. This was by far the most difficult boss yet. Every attack of his would cut down whole life bars per use, while attacks against him were greatly weakened. Solomon's Slash, for example, was now lucky to take away 1/2 a life bar. During this battle, I gained a great appreciation for 2 things, the boss fight time limit and the Heart Temple. Had it not been for those things, I might never have beaten this boss. To take down this behemoth, I came up with a strategy. I would switch between Godzilla and Solomon. As one began to get dangerously low on health, I would take him to the Heart Temple, while fighting Chimera with the other. I should count my blessings that Chimera couldn't regain lost health. A very interesting thing about Chimera was that the colored sections of his body corresponded to his different body parts, so each body part effectively had its own life meter. The head was invincible as long as the other parts were present, and it would always be the last part to be destroyed. In addition to being difficult, it was also the longest fight by far. I tried to remember how many times I got taken out of the fight by the timer, but I lost count around 13. Eventually, I had destroyed all components but the head, which now flew around on its own at an incredible speed. Chimera fought well, but I was extremely determined, and once he was reduced to a head, he no longer had the power to defeat Solomon, and I had heat beamed him into oblivion. And then, Chimera was no more. I was exhausted after that drawn-out fight, and worried that might affect my performance in the End World Chase level. The headquarters icon was replaced, but not by the Hellbeast face. Instead, it was a crucifix. I was completely stunned. I wasn't excited about seeing the Hellbeast icon again, but if there was only one good thing about those levels, it's that they were predictable. I had a basic idea of what to expect. But now, here it was at the end, and the icon was completely different. What did it mean, and why a crucifix? It made me very uneasy. I attempted to start the level with Solomon, but couldn't. I got this notice that simply stated, Solomon can't enter here. It didn't say why, but I think it has to do with Solomon's demonic appearance? Since Solomon was out of the question, I went with Godzilla instead. Once I saw the level, the crucifix made sense. The level was a graveyard. I was still on edge, thinking this was some kind of trick. The last level had always involved running from the demonic beast, and I wasn't going to be fooled into thinking this would be any different. So I started out running, but after a minute without interruption, I slowed down. It was during this time that the music caught my attention. I knew it sounded familiar when I first heard it, but it took a while before I realized that it was an 8-bit rendition of Prayer for Peace from the first Godzilla film. A very sad, powerful song even in this form. At 2 minutes into the level, I encountered something that I wasn't sure how to react to. My first instinct was to run, but this blue statue-esque being simply floated in place, and I felt compelled to just stare at it for a time. Since this was a grave, and it was floating over a chapel, I guessed that this was some kind of angel watching over the deceased. It gave me a strange but warm feeling. I wouldn't say happy, but I felt that I was at peace somehow. I had never seen this being before, yet it seemed very familiar to me. Just as I was gonna leave, the hell beast appeared, and its presence warped the music into a terrifying, discordant screeching and transformed the level, desecrating the tombstones as a new ground appeared, comprised of blood-soaked bodies. I could feel my heart now beating out of control. I had no chance of escape with the monster that close. It lunged for the kill, but the angel got in its way. The demon roared and started crawling through the angel's leg, and tears of blood streamed from its eyes. I wanted to save the angel, but there was nothing I could do. I had to honor its sacrifice and run, and so I ran through the hellish landscape as fast as I could. The beast soon caught up with me, still swallowing the body of the angel whose legs it had torn off, and this sight made my terror change into anger. I now found myself hating this horrible monster. There was no doubt in my mind that it was pure evil, and I wanted it to die. When I got to the end, I remembered how it responded to my insult in trance. I spoke to it and said, "You're gonna pay." This was its response. I had no idea how I would follow up on that threat, and nothing could have prepared me for the horrors of the final world. Zenith. Chapter 7. Zenith. And here we are, at the final world. I don't like to discuss this part, and it still bothers me very much, but it's something I have to do so that I can put this all behind me. People deserve to know. At this point, I was well aware of the game's unnatural nature, but Zenith was different than the other worlds. While the others were certainly strange, and sometimes frightening, the world of Zenith was like a nightmare, and I didn't have to go any further than the board screen for an indication that something was wrong with Zenith. The first thing I noticed was the blood-red texture of the board, and the music, which was an eerie whistling tune. I noticed that I had Solomon and Agiris back, and I felt better for a second. Then I scrolled over to the right to see who my enemies would be this time. This time it was Destoroyah and Ghidorah, but judging from the icon, it was a different Ghidorah than the original, standing on the ground instead of flying. The grotesquely detailed pinkish red icon also caught my eye. I couldn't tell what it was supposed to be, but I was afraid to find out. Going back to my side of the board, I decided there wasn't much of a choice but to do my usual routine and getting the quiz level done before anything else. I was not ready for what happened. I jumped back when this appeared, accompanied by a terribly distorted version of the password theme. It looked as if Face had fallen victim to some terrible glitch. Is this what he meant by, "Will you miss me?" Did he know this would happen? My thoughts were stopped short as I noticed the screen was glitching and seemingly falling apart while I was inactive, and so I quickly rushed out. And when I got to the board, I had somehow gained a new monster. I hadn't even been asked if I wanted one. I tried to select it, and this happened. What the hell is going on? The game's behavior was scaring me, and I hadn't even started the levels yet. I couldn't understand why I was randomly given a new character and then denied use of it, but for the time being, there was little that could be done, and I viewed the last TV screen. No animation, no music, dead. Every instinct I had was telling me to stop playing, to just turn the game off, and something in the game itself might have been trying to warn me as to just how terrible the last world was. But then, every stretch of the way, I was compelled to give up. I couldn't do that now, on the last world? Besides, after taunting me with memories of Melissa, I felt the game owed me some answers. I noticed that the first level was a red temple, so at least I would be familiar with the level graphics if nothing else, and I went in with Godzilla, the monster I was most familiar with. Godzilla had been shrunk, the level and score meters had vanished, and the blue temple statue faces were back. The music was similar to the blue temple, also strange, haunting, and with vocalizations. I tried to get my spirits up by thinking, well, if this level is like the blue temple, then it might mean there are no enemies to deal with. How wrong I was. After a short walk, the statue's eyes started glowing, and a pack of the beasts from Shadow Labyrinth came charging into me. Since they were coming from the right of the screen, I had to fight my way through them. This battle greatly tested my reflexes, but thanks to my speed, I plowed through the beasts. They gave off health power-ups after dying, which helped recover the damage they had given me. However, as I continued through the hallway, the statue's eyes glowed again, summoning another wave. It seemed to be the same number of them, but I was less prepared this time, and took more damage. I had gone through 4 of these waves until I reached the end of the hall, where I heat beamed the last of the monsters over the edge into an abyss. At first it seemed like I reached a dead end, but after the statue's eyes stopped glowing, a brick path slowly appeared before me. I followed the path, which kept me moving towards the right until I stopped at a wall, where I was to go vertically by jumping up ledges. Along the way, I encountered new creatures, and some sort of strange shrine which had a statue of the Hell Beast and some other creature I didn't recognize. As I went through, the path took a downward direction. I had to carefully aim my jumps to avoid the enemies, which were plentiful in this part of the stage. They didn't have many attacks, but they could easily shove you over the edge of a platform. At the end of this tunnel, there were a few small platforms floating above nothingness. I landed on one towards the left of the screen, and then something came down from above. It looked like the blue angel from the graveyard, except now it was red and had a skull face. Any of the pleasant feelings I had from the blue angel were not present with this red one, and as it hovered around, its eye sockets started glowing just like the statues, summoning monsters to attack me. Surely this was not the same benevolent being I encountered before. This must be some kind of imposter. The battle was nerve-wracking, as I started with nearly half my health and had to deal with multiple opponents, as well as the threat of gravity. To make things even worse, as the red angel took damage, some of the panels fell. Only 3 remained. But my luck hadn't run out just yet. Just when I thought it was over, I struck the red angel one more time, and it turned out that one last hit was all it could take. Just as the red angel completely disintegrated, the game instantly went back to the zenith board. I moved Mothra to the nearest stage from the red temple, which seemed to be a garbled mess of letters spelling kill, and began playing. As suspected, all the level graphics were made of jumbled letters, and Mothra, just like Godzilla, was shrunk to half size. I began to suspect that all the zenith levels would be like this. The background music was terrible, like if someone put all the sounds in NES was capable of making into a blender and then piecing them back together into a song. I had to turn the volume down because of it. Playing as Mothra made avoiding the enemies easier, but they were nonetheless determined to get at me. The first enemies I saw were headless Gigans, and later on there were hybrid monsters pieced together from previous bosses, like the Biollante headed thing seen above. 5 minutes had gone by as I didn't see anything new, and the level shifted into another segment. The music changed from the loud and annoying beeps into something far more ambient and menacing. The level graphics also changed, now looking like a blood-drenched junkyard. The way everything in this level was red made it sickening to look at. The enemies multiplied in number, never ceasing to follow after me, and became harder and harder to avoid, and at the end of the level, the situation reached a climax, as the swarms of monsters fused together into one enormous terrifying hybrid. Once I'd gotten through the initial shock, I discovered the way to destroy this thing, constantly shooting eye beams at the Hedorah cluster that formed its, quote, heads. If you attacked anywhere else, it would regenerate the damage. Even with that knowledge, this was an extremely difficult fight. I'd say it was as hard as fighting the Moon Beast was, if not harder. Its most common attack was lunging forward with its arms, covered with Gigan saws and blades. If they touched it, it would instantly drain health. When it was over, the remaining monsters collapsed into a heap. Then they, and the ground below them, started to disintegrate and sink towards the bottom of the screen. When I came back to the board, I thought to myself, so far the game has been putting the easiest levels first. If that's the case, how bad will the rest of Zenith be? With 2 levels down and 3 to go, my monsters and I had taken our foothold in the world of nightmares that was Zenith. Deciding what action to take next was more tense and difficult than ever before, but ultimately, I had no way of knowing what the next levels would be like or how well my monsters would be prepared for them, so my only option was to guess. I tried to interpret what the icons of the next levels ahead of me were. The last level before the boss battles was obviously representing some type of volcanic area with lava and open flames. The middle icon I still didn't get, except that it looked fleshy and vaguely like an Orion of some kind, oddly oversized as well. The one I was nearest to and about to enter next looked like thorny vines covering a puddle of blood. I guess this would be a level with blood rivers, like the chase level of Dementia. As such, I went with Anguirus, because due to his rolling move, he would have the fastest speed while submerged. The level, which I call Blood Lake, looked like I expected. Rivers of blood accompanied by thorn-covered vines, which were scattered along the sides of the ground. The music was rather faint, but I could hear a distinct drum beat and a few other instruments. A lot of echoes, and sometimes it sounded like someone was hitting a drum underwater. I was disappointed to see that Anguirus was shrunk just as Godzilla and Mothra had been. Apparently, all the Zenith levels would be like this. I felt less secure with my giant monsters no longer giant. I walked along without interruption for only a minute until my path reached a dead end. There was a massive gap between the ground I was walking on and the ground to the right of the screen. I would have swam across it and continued walking to the right, but due to the huge mass of brambles in the way, there was nowhere to go. 2 creatures with gliding membranes on their arms and lamprey-like mouths were perched on the outstretched vines and screeching at me, much like a cow does to an invader of its territory. Another unnerving display of possible sentience by the creatures of this game, if it's even accurate to refer to them as being of the game, that is. I descended into blood, slowly sinking to the floor. Aquatic enemies were everywhere, and they were hard to avoid. The black shark in particular was very aggressive and hard to deal with, but thankfully I only encountered one. As the scene became more and more crowded, I swam up to the surface, just to find that it was littered with floating corpses. Creepy, but at least they're not a threat. Or so I thought, until they all sprang to life and leaped on me. They were trying to pull me under, and they were draining my health as they did it. They all attacked as a group, and when I got one off me, another would jump on me from behind. I had to curl up into a ball and roll for them to loosen their grip. but when I did, I quickly retreated. It wasn't long before I had reached another land path. A note regarding the brambles. You can stand on them, but it causes pain. And you can also destroy some of the vines, but only the thinner ones. I had to destroy multiple vines as well as dealing with more enemies. I was interrupted by a screen. The screen was only up for about 30 seconds. When I went back to the level, I was facing another dead end and a pregnant humanoid creature being hung from the top right of the screen by a spine or umbilical cord. Instantly, the creature's belly was split open from the inside, and as the lower part of its body was ripped apart and fell into the river below, the Blood Lake's boss was revealed. It came flying towards me, making a shrill, hacking scream. I was forced to move back. The bat was a highly mobile boss, fast and difficult to hit. As I moved back along the ground, the monster opened its mouth and shot out a barrage of needles. I jumped over them and managed to give it a blow to the head, and it started flying out of my reach. As the bat was flying, it shot a stream of fire from its eye sockets and started trying to hit me with the flames. I rolled along the ground, which drained my power, but put us at equal speed. This cycle repeated around 3 times until the monster was defeated. With most of my health drained, I went back to the edge of the level, and the large bramble vine blocking the exit was now gone. Now, only 2 levels left to go. Who to send this time? Godzilla, Mothra, and Anguirus had all completed 1 level, leaving Solomon, and also the mysterious 5th monster. I tried again to access it, but with no luck. I chose to use Godzilla for the next level, and Solomon for the final one. The second to last level is what I refer to as the organic level, which was the most visually unpleasant of them all. Right from the start, I could see that the graphics were freakishly different. The atmosphere was gruesome and foreboding, with the addition of the loud droning music. I was dreading what I would see in these levels, and it was only a few seconds before something appeared. 2 hideous things. It's hard to describe most of this level. Everything had this disturbing semi-real look to it. Most of the enemies look halfway between real animals and misshapen lumps of gore with teeth. It's also worth noting that all of them were considerably larger than Godzilla, and although the majority were not very intelligent, each of them took around 30 plus hits to kill. Due to this, it was a better idea to run away from them than fight, but it was never clear exactly what direction to run to. While most levels involved going to the right to get to the exit, the path of this level was primarily going down, by walking to the edge of one platform and jumping down to a lower one. There was no way to make sure you were going the right way, nor any apparent means of getting back up to the higher platforms if necessary. Also, certain enemies acted as if they were aware you had to jump down, and would stand at the edge of a lower platform waiting for you. When this happened, I would have to walk back and wait until the monster would leave. As I went on, I came across platforms stacked above each other with little space in between, looking like a maze. This meant that I couldn't jump, and it made escape from enemies difficult. Thankfully, the only enemies able to fit through these mazes were the 4-legged beasts seen at the beginning of the level. Adding to the difficulty were long, tapeworm-esque monsters. They would rise themselves up between the platforms and trap you. The only attack they responded to was Heat Beam, which would cause them to shrink back down, but this was costing even more power, and I couldn't afford to do that without the Heat Beam for long. While trying to avoid the abominations that dwell in this level, I found out that if you stand idle in one place for too long, the ground tries to absorb your monster. I think it was about 4 minutes before the end that this level was making me physically sick. The tension was getting to me, and having to take in all these disgusting sights made me want to puke. I nearly did pause the game and look for a bag, but I was able to hold it together. I also found a trick at the end of the level, though it was too late to do me any real good. If 2 different species of monster run into each other face to face, they would fight each other and leave me alone. I didn't intentionally cause this, it just happened. Finally, at the end, it was time for another boss fight. It was certainly ugly, but not quite as horrific as I feared it would be. But more important than dealing with its appearance was defeating it, and since I had less than half my health bar to start, there was no room for errors. It was attached to the floor when I first saw it, but after 10 hits, it detached from the floor and began floating. It moved fast, and unlike the Blood Lake's boss, he wasn't impeded by any sort of gravity. It was even able to fly through the ground without any collision effect. It used this to its advantage, and would float beneath the ground and spring up randomly to bite at you, but it stopped doing this after a few well-aimed kicks to the face. The pink area on its upper jaw was its weak point. Too many hits there would cause it to spasm uncontrollably. The new strategy was to rapidly float up and down while moving back and forth across the stage, trying to constantly keep his jaws aimed towards me. Health was getting critical at this point, and I spammed the Heat Beam, from which it had no defense. In the last stretch of the battle, the monster had lost its mind, rapidly rushing back and forth and gnashing its jaws. I had to duck under it and then strike when its back was turned. 20 more hits and it was destroyed. One last level to go. And then it was down to one last level. I didn't hesitate. I selected Solomon and entered, perhaps a little too fast. This last level was definitely the peak of disconnect between what the NES was graphically capable of and what this game could create. The music also caught my attention. It was one of the only songs that appeared more than once. The horrible screeching from when the Hellbeast appeared in the graveyard. As soon as I started, there was already an enemy prepared to attack, a centaur wielding a whip, and it wasn't alone. When I started fighting, several more centaurs appeared, coming from both sides of the screen at the same time. It was too much to handle. Solomon's flight saved me from taking too much damage at the start of the level. The centaurs followed after, but seemed to be unable to jump. After escaping the centaurs, I noticed the gaps in the ground. While trying to avoid the jumping sword-mouthed enemies in mid-flight, I got close to the surface of the lava, and a creature emerged and tried to grab me. It didn't succeed, but I was startled. Careful maneuvering would be needed to avoid instant death here. As new enemies appeared, the level soon became very difficult. A lot of trouble came from the stocky red demons that stood on top of tall, narrow mountains and spewed fire. I got by them by waiting till their back was turned, and hitting them with a flying kick, which made them fall into the lava. It was at this time I noticed that I wasn't gaining any health from killing enemies. Not all the ground was stable. At one point, the ground was reduced to small chunks that slowly drifted towards the right. Some of them would sink into the lava upon landing on them, and there was no way to tell which ones would sink and which ones wouldn't. Being so close to the lava added the threat of the lava creatures, and this was very frustrating. I was also feeling very hot, which made concentrating hard. If you've ever had a heat rash, it felt similar to that. I had to periodically stop for water because of it. This was almost certainly due to the game and not my imagination, but I kept pushing the thought out of my head. I didn't want to think about it. At the end of the stage, I encountered the boss rising from the lava. Its arrival noted with an ungodly howling roar. When it walked onto land, I saw how gigantic it was, several times the size of Solomon. I was about to fly up and attack it when it opened its mouth and let out a huge blast of fire. I had to fly to dodge the flames, and then get close enough to the boss to fire a heat beam at its face, causing it to stumble backwards. If it didn't stumble backwards, it would have kept moving left until it forced Solomon into the lava, as there was no more ground within reach. The beast had to wait between uses of its fire breath, as it seemed to cost a great deal of energy. I used this time to attack it, but fire wasn't its only weapon, and I had to be wary of the monster swatting at me with its clawed hands. As its health decreased, it moved faster, and the battle felt like a tug-of-war between the two monsters over this bridge of land. After about 40 hits, it was defeated, tumbling backwards into the lava from whence it came, and then the final stage had been completed. At last, it was down to 2 bosses, and a final encounter with the Hell Beast. For some reason, I thought Ghidorah would be easier to beat, so I confronted him first. The classic Ghidorah battle music from the original started up as I was forced against the new King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah was as powerful and unrelenting as ever. He instantly lashed out with gravity beams, which were more damaging than Godzilla's heat beam. It became a struggle of constantly beating Ghidorah at every opportunity to keep him from using the attack. But Ghidorah soon saw my tactic and started using physical attacks as well. He would strike with each of his necks, knocking me backward and making it impossible to get close enough to punch him. But I had an idea: to wait for him to lunge from one of his heads, and immediately blasted with a heat beam. It worked, and to my surprise, the heat beam actually obliterated Ghidorah's middle head. It was only a few seconds before I realized what this would lead to, and sure enough, King Ghidorah was using the power of the glitch to transform into Mecha King Ghidorah. But what really shocked me was the sudden change of music. I had heard it before, but it wasn't from the original NES game. It was from the game Super Godzilla, during the Mecha King Ghidorah fight. Mecha King Ghidorah's first attack was its most deadly, the machine hand. Very similar to Gigan's Saw. It immobilizes the monster and rapidly drains the health bar. Fortunately, before Ghidorah could do a lot of damage, the timer ran out. I would need to defeat Mecha King Ghidorah quickly to prevent him from using the machine hand, so I sent Solomon to fight him. The two monsters were evenly matched in strength, but Solomon was faster, and by slashing and heat beaming without pause, the cyborg monster soon met its end. With Ghidorah defeated, I was returned to the board. I now outnumbered the enemy by 4 monsters to 1, and victory seemed to be soon at hand. The base icon had changed to a blood red color. I could feel hatred emanating from it. I started the fight against Destoroyah with Anguirus, and the music was the same as Ghidorah's. When the fight began, Destoroyah was in a microscopic form. After one hit, it changed into the Juvenile, which had a few attacks and was also dealt with easily. The fight became serious once Destoroyah entered the aggregate form, gaining the use of large arms and micro-oxygen beam. Anguirus' roll attack, which had been very useful up until now, was rendered useless by Destoroyah constantly attacking me with his large arms when I tried to use it. For this part of the fight, I had to rely on brute strength. Just before the time ran out, Destoroyah had changed into its flying form, which Anguirus was ill-suited to fight against. Going back in, I fought against the flying form with Mothra, which seemed fitting. Mothra was weaker than Anguirus, but was better equipped to dodge and counter flying Destoroyah's attacks, so the fight was in my favor. However, the Mecha Ghidorah fight started playing and Destoroyah changed from his final form sooner than expected, which drastically turned the tables. Mothra's attacks were doing very little to Destoroyah, and I had to move furiously to avoid damage while waiting for the timer to run out, even though it would be near impossible to beat Destoroyah with Mothra, I still had 3 other monsters. Final form Destoroyah was very resistant to taking damage, and the heavily armored foe would not be defeated without a long fight. In the last part of the fight, I wasn't using much strategy, just attacking as brutally and fast as I could. On its last bar of health, Destoroyah tried one last counterattack, a beam of energy from its chest. I don't know how powerful it would have been, because just before it could fire, I punched Destoroyah in the chest cavity, destroying him. And then that was it. The last kaiju boss was gone. In the midst of all the excitement, I had briefly forgotten that there was still one last thing to do before the game was over. Seeing the icon again hit me like a ton of bricks, and I froze for a few minutes. I had come so far to get to this point, but I was terrified. I really didn't want to know what this last encounter was going to be like. Before I could let myself think about it any longer, I moved Godzilla over and began the stage. You're here now. This is the end. Just one last thing, and then it's all over. And when the screen changed, there was nothing. Just Godzilla and a black screen. I walked back and forth, fired a heat beam, nothing happened, until I heard something. The faint sound of a familiar drum beat. Chapter 8, Finale, Part 1. Oh dear God. That was my first thought on realizing I would have to fight Red, the creature that tormented me through nearly the whole game. How would I be able to fight something that can kill you with one touch? It seemed totally impossible. Thankfully, Red was no longer able to deliver one-hit kills, but despite that, this was still the most difficult battle I've ever faced, in this game or otherwise. If I had any real comprehension of what I was getting into before I started the fight, I would have never done it. I very soon learned what a horrible mistake I had made. Red reached out and clawed at Godzilla, and when those claws cut through him, I felt it. I know that's common for people to cringe up when their video game character gets hit or loses a life, but this wasn't that. This was genuine physical pain. When the pain struck me, I paused the game. I hadn't suffered any actual injuries, but it felt like my shoulder had just been clawed through. I had seen and experienced many unpleasant things at this point, but the game causing me real pain was where I drew the line. Yes, I would be disappointed that I wouldn't get to see the ending, but the risk was no longer worth it. I was about to get up and take one last screenshot and turn off the NES when I realized something. I couldn't get up. I was paralyzed to my seat. The only muscles I could move were my fingers and thumbs. As the terror set in, a new message appeared on the screen. You are not leaving. I started to scream, but only a weak choking sound was coming out. I desperately tried to get my body to move, but it did nothing. I was looking every direction, and then I looked over at the computer. Somehow the computer was taking screenshots of the game on its own when I began the fight. I still don't know how or why. Something in the game must have been causing it. Since Red could hear what I was saying, I tried begging for him to let me go. From here, things started to get hazy as I was under extreme stress at the time, but from what I can remember, I said, I'm sorry I insulted you. I didn't mean it. I didn't know things would get this serious. Please just let me go. If you let me go, I promise I'll never tell anyone or turn the game on ever again, please. And Red replied, you pathetic worm. It's too late now. Only one will survive. Only one will survive? The statement couldn't be any more clear. If I couldn't kill Red, then he would kill me. Like an idiot, I had played around with something I didn't understand, and now it might cost me my life. I stopped struggling to move and accepted the reality of the situation. There was only one way to get out of this alive. I had to kill Red. It all went by so fast. If it weren't for the screenshots, I might not have remembered any of this. Just like in the chase levels, Red moved at a horrifyingly fast speed. There was barely enough time to process a thought, and thus, there was no time to form a strategy. I had to rely solely on my wits and reflexes. To make things worse, there was no way to predict what kind of attacks Red might use, so I constantly had to be on the offensive and defensive. I felt every hit that Godzilla took. They all hurt. I tried so hard to avoid the damage, but every attack that I dodged left me vulnerable to another, and the pain would only get worse. After he jumped over me, Red's eyes started to glow. I moved as far back as I could and ducked, but there was no dodging this one. When this hit me, I really did scream. I screamed so loud that someone else in the apartment should have heard me, but they didn't. Just looking at the image hurts me, making me remember the incinerating burn. I paused the game because it hurt so bad, but Red unpaused the game to attack me again, which made me furious. I immediately counterattacked with the heat beam, again and again, until the power meter was totally diminished. I wanted Red to hurt like I did. Just before the timer ran out, Red transitioned into his swimming form. I didn't think the timer would still be affecting the battle like this. I'm thankful for it, because it gave me a few minutes to collect my thoughts and decide what to do next. I chose to fight Red's next two forms with the monsters I had encountered them with, so Anguirus was next. It probably wasn't all that smart of an idea, but that's what I did. I jumped up and he beamed Red in the face, and he moved off screen where I couldn't reach him. Then a wave of large mines started to fall from above. I felt this was unfair, so I shouted, if you're going to cheat, then why do you even let me use the controller? Can't break rules. And then He came at me, rushing from the top left of the screen downwards. Damn it! Now I wouldn't even be able to see where his next attack was coming from. Red continued to strike from random angles. I constantly moved to swerve around him. Another 40 seconds went by, and Anguirus was nearly gone. But together we had forced Red into his flying form, so it was Mothra's turn next. Deciding to fight Red with Mothra was a terrible idea. Mothra was instantly overwhelmed by Red, and the life meter was devastated in a mere 15 seconds. And once Mothra's life was down to 2 bars, Red did something I didn't see coming. He reached out, grabbed Mothra, and ate her. After Mothra was devoured, I felt an agonizing pain, like being crushed to death. Mothra had been killed for my stupidity, and I would share the pain. It was a short transition from the battle to the board, but it felt like an hour. The pain, combined with being unable to move, was driving me insane. I wanted so badly for this to end. I never wanted anything so much, but still, I had hope. There was only one monster left that could be brought to full health by engaging Red in battle, Solomon. If any of them had a chance to save my life now, it would be him. Solomon apparently had some history with Red, as when the fight started, this dialogue happened. Traitor, I always hated you. You can die like the rest. I'd rather die than serve you. Red took me by surprise by immediately burning me with his demonic fire for a second time. As much as it hurt, it actually worked to my advantage. Since Solomon started at full life, he still had some to spare. But now Red had used up all his energy and couldn't use his ultimate weapon any longer. Now he would die. As he drew close to the end of his life bar, Red turned his whole body to face the screen and flew upwards, then slamming back down in an attempt to crush Solomon. When that failed to work, he tried to devour Solomon like he had Mothra, but he wouldn't be eating my monster this time. I thought I had won. But something was wrong. Red wasn't sinking to the bottom, and I still couldn't move. Red was still alive. I'm not done with you. Chapter 8, Finale, Part 2. After seeing himself be defeated by Solomon, Red had reconstructed his body into his gigantic final form, transporting us to a blazing inferno in the process. It was reminiscent of our first encounter, except now the scenery, much like the true power of Red, had become very real. The music had erupted into a loud, blaring sound, a furious drum of death. Faced against Red's insane amount of health, my own demise was imminent. Solomon was my strongest monster, but not even he stood a chance. It was like trying to fight a mountain. Within seconds, Solomon was overpowered and dropped to the floor, when Red crushed him to death underneath his foot. The sadistic demon took his time as he snapped Solomon's vertebrae and ribs like dry, brittle twigs. I could tell he was enjoying our pain. You are weak. Your monsters are weak. You will all die. This is hopeless. I'm a dead man. I had no choice but to send another monster to his death. We were all gonna die. I only hoped they would forgive me. After decreasing Red's health by a minuscule amount, Anguirus was also obliterated. Red unleashed a hail of blazing hot needles into his face until he collapsed. Another moment of unspeakable agony. Then, nothingness as my ally faded away. You can't win. Zachary. I asked Red how he knew my name, and then he said it. I've known you for a long time. I'll tell you a secret. I killed Melissa. For years, she was being tortured by something nobody understood. Now I knew what it was. Now I understood why I was mocked about Melissa's death, and how the game knew about it. Because he knew about it. Because he was the one responsible. And this time, he was gonna kill me. Send your last monster. I will end this futile struggle. I was taken back to the board to send Godzilla to his final stand. Barely anything was left of the board. Just Godzilla and red icons and the 5th monster. In the midst of everything that was happening, I had completely forgotten about it. I tried yet again to select it. I cursed, I begged, I screamed at it to do something, anything to help me, to no avail. There was only one thing to do. I knew Godzilla didn't stand any more of a chance than the rest did. But maybe now that all the other monsters were gone, the 5th monster might finally awaken. I managed to get the creature's icon selected, and I pressed the A button as fast as I could. The icon started to shake, as if it were trying desperately to move. It was then that Red decided he was done playing fair, and before I could activate the monster, he went for the killing blow, paralyzing my heart. My hands started to become numb and unfeeling, but even as my vision was fading away, I still tried to press the A button. Game over. Red surely was breaking one of his rules, but he must have thought that if he could kill me quickly, then it would be too late for any consequences to matter. He would have won. He was wrong. Red's power was being challenged by another force. It prevented him from killing me, and when I regained my vision, I saw a familiar sight. Zach, we don't have much time. Who are you? You already know me. I am Melissa. What? How's that possible? Red told me that he killed you. It's true. Even after death, he tortures me. If you can't stop him, he'll do the same to you. But how will I be able to stop him now? I can't fight Red, but there is one who can. I will release him from Red's grasp. Don't give up. I love you. Her words stirred something inside of me. I wasn't gonna die like this, and I had more to fight for than just my own life. I had to fight to save Melissa and the world she inhabits. With her help, the fifth monster was finally unleashed. It was time to end this, once and for all. Together, we would take this damned hellspawn out of existence. Acacius, the golden light. They can't save you. Acacius was by far the strongest playable monster in the game. He had to be. If we were to have any chance of surviving, his punch involved turning his hands into blades, which caused tremendous damage, but Red had more than enough life to spare. In the end, this would come down to pure skill. With one final strike, Red was destroyed. His body disintegrated and sank below, accompanied by a soar of triumphant music. Slowly, the paralysis wore off, and I was able to stand up again. We had done it. Melissa's death had been avenged, and I felt overwhelming happiness until I remembered all the death and pain that led up to this point, all the other monsters who had fought and died. I was about to mourn them, but the game had yet to conclude. Tears of joy streamed down my face, and I broke out crying. I cried harder than I have in several years, maybe in my whole life. All I had been through, all I had discovered, and now the game was coming to an end. But before she and the others left, Melissa had something to tell me. You have saved us. We are forever grateful. We'll be together again. Someday. Epilogue. I am Zachary, and at the time I write this, it has been 3 weeks since the fateful night when I played the NES Godzilla game. Going back to that night to immediately after I turned off the NES. Once I was able to start walking around again, the first thing I did was unplug the NES, take out the cartridge, and put them in separate sock drawers. I looked over at the computer, all the screenshots you've seen in the story were saved. I backed up all the images on a flash drive before I turned the computer off, just in case. After that, I hit the bed and instantly passed out. It wasn't a restful sleep, but one of complete exhaustion. It felt like no time had passed before I awoke again. And what a day that was. The first thought I recall coming to mind was, what the hell happened last night? I thought about it for a short while until it occurred to me to contact the person I got the game from to begin with, Billy. So I called him up, and I told him just to come over to my apartment, which he did. And I showed him the screenshots and gave him a very basic summary of what had happened. At first, he thought I was pulling a joke on him, but he soon realized that wasn't the case. Once it hit him that this was real, he was speechless. He made it clear that he had absolutely not tampered with the game and had no idea about any of this. So then the obvious question was asked to Billy, where did you get the game from? I got the simple answer of another friend of mine that I trade games with. He assured me that this was a trustworthy person and that he had never had any issues with games he got from him before. So then Billy called him, but when we told this guy the story, he was as shocked and surprised as anyone, except he abruptly hung up on us. This clearly was going nowhere. Before Billy left that day, he asked me if I wanted to take the cartridge and dispose of it. I sharply declined. He asked how I could possibly want to keep the thing. I told him that I needed to think it over, and that was that. Billy and I haven't talked much since. Even though I told him this isn't the case, I got the impression that Billy thinks what happened with the game is his fault. After he left that day, I did a lot of thinking. It was very hard for me to do anything else, really. I couldn't stop thinking about the game. There were so many questions left unanswered. What was Red? Was Melissa really in the game? How did she get there? Why did all this happen with this game? But the question that kept me up for many nights was, Red said he had known me for a long time. How? Ever since then, I can't shake this feeling of being watched. The game made me ask myself questions about death and reality in ways I never wanted to think about. I'm not too sure of anything anymore. Constantly thinking about it soon began to have a negative impact on my life. I just didn't care about anything else at this point. By comparison, all the other day-to-day activities seemed utterly pointless. I eventually decided that I had to choose between one of two things: try to play the game again or destroy it. I tried several times to convince myself to try the former, but I never got farther than plugging the NES back up. Just touching the cartridge made me remember all the pain I felt during the fight with Red. I wondered if perhaps playing the game again myself might cause something terrible to happen. I didn't know anything about how this game worked, and it was too risky. I wasn't sure I could stand another round of the game anyway. So then, it was time for the other option. Wanting to get some fresh air, I took the game with me and drove to the lake, planning to throw it in. I got up to the lake with the cartridge in my hands, and I looked down on it, and I thought of Melissa. If what I had experienced in the game was indeed genuine, doing what I did may have been the only way to save her from endless torture. In a way, this warped game might have saved her soul. Damn it. Once that thought came into my head, I knew I wouldn't be able to destroy it. So I just sat down at a bench, gazing at the lake for about an hour. Ultimately, I decided on a third option, selling the game on eBay. It may be selfish, but I promise you it has nothing to do with money. I don't care how much or little I get paid for this game, believe me. It's selfish because I don't want the responsibility of owning this cartridge anymore. I cannot dwell on this forever, and the only way I can deal with this is by getting the game out of my life. So this brings me to the main reasons I created a summary of these events. First is to record the details while I can remember them, and second is that whoever bids on this game knows what they're getting into. I can't guarantee the safety of anyone else who plays the game, or that anything will happen at all, but to the new owner of the game, remember this: be careful, and if you feel as if the game is literally messing with your mind, shut the damn thing off. Alright, so that was NES Godzilla, and if in case you're wondering what my wallpaper is, it is this. Yeah. I love this wallpaper so much. Don't give up, I love you. Because you could really think about this angel being anyone that, like, you want it to be. You know, I think about it as a lot of people I've interacted with telling me to not give up and they love me. This story touched my heart. I don't think I'd ever read it again. I don't like reread books. I don't even read books. But man, thank you guys for suggesting it, for real. Like, I just love the story. It was a slow start. It was like it was a very slow start, actually. But yeah, like I said, I think I'd put this behind Jeff the Killer. In terms of, like, details, this is number one. This is number one. In terms of details, in terms of legendary status, is Jeff the Killer. But in terms of, like, if you want to read a good book, this is the closest to it. But yeah, now it's time to head on to the outro. So, now that we're here, I do want to let you guys know, thank you for giving me this platform with these stories, to be able to read creepypastas, to be able to do something so fun and get paid for it. I really appreciate you guys. Episode 1 went stupid. Episode 2 flopped at the beginning, but then it started gaining views at, like, sometime later. This one, I don't know how it'll do. I don't really care. I'm just grateful I was able to get this up. As for volume 4, I do not think there will be a volume 4. The closest thing would be when I make a mega compilation, because I want to upload like a 9-hour video, which would be all of these together, and just put that out. But like months from now, I don't want to spam, because it seems like I'm a creepypasta fan page now. I'm not. I do like them. I think I'll sprinkle in some new ones if I make like a 9-hour video. It took a long time to read all the stories, so please leave a like. Please, like, it took such a long time. Y'all know how much water I consumed? Y'all know how many stutters like Andrew had to cut out? I stutter a lot while reading. Oh my god. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you guys for supporting this series, and I'll see you guys next time I upload.